fried. Deep fat fried.
Hey everybody, welcome to yet another edition of Deep Fat Fried. Oh, yeah! Do you feel it?
Christ. See, I'm glad you got pumped. TJ took my advice and got pumped because I kind of told him before the show. I told both of these guys to bring their A game tonight. Although,
Bring your fucking A game, you
He's got fake
cocksuckers.
energy. Nice Red Bull you got there, huh?
Oh, bring your fake energy, TJ. You scared, Scotty? You scared, Scotty? Oh, you little pussy ass bitch, right? Oh, why don't you go fucking crawl back into your mama's pussy, you little bitch?
I'd be scared about that.
So Paul is going to pit us in some kind of competition against one another, I guess. But you know what, Scotty? Like I was saying before the show even started, there ain't no competition between you and me. I win. Show's over. Canceled.
Sure about that, TJ?
I'm 99.999999999% sure, bitch.
You know,
Wow.
TJ, it's only hubris if you lose.
I don't care what the
buddy.
contest is. I don't care what it is.
Okay.
I don't care
You don't
what
care
way
what
we're
the
being pitted against each other. Doesn't matter. I'll win.
All right, let's do push-ups.
No problem.
I'm gonna do Joe Biden. TJ.
No
Let's do
problem. Let's
push-ups.
fucking go.
Let's
We'll
do
fucking
push-ups,
do
Jack.
push-ups.
Come on, Jack. Let's do push-ups.
I'm going to do mine Howard Bloom style.
You're gonna hump the floor.
No, that's a recognized form of push-up, brah.
By
It's a
who?
recognized form of push-up. You can't do that. You got to do fucking classic military style
I hate
push-ups.
to break it to you, TJ.
But I'm doing the
they're
Howard
not
Bloom push-ups. I'm doing the Howard Bloom push-up, bro.
well, I'm glad the spirit of competition is alive and well in the two of you tonight. It should make for a lively show and maybe even an interesting and funny show.
Yeah, probably
We'll
not,
see.
though. Probably not,
We'll
Paul.
see.
'Cause
Probably
you-
not. It'll probably suck.
You put it together, so.
I put it together, so most likely it's gonna be one of the worst
I
episodes.
mean, I hate to tell you this, Paul, but like, you know, as far as like the track record episode goes, like Scotty, like 10% of his episodes are good. Paul, pretty much none of yours are good. Maybe once or twice you've like
See, that's
accidentally
the thing,
stumbled
though.
on a greatness. but
Maybe 1% of mine are good, but that 1% shine bright like a diamond, TJ.
but
Like a
everything
diamond.
I do is gold. Just 100% across the board, all gold.
Yeah, TJ. Even though I beat your episodes all the time.
No, you don't.
Beat them.
No,
Yeah,
you
I do.
don't. No, you
You
don't.
wanna go? You wanna go look?
No, you don't.
You wanna go look, TJ?
You know what?
wanna go
You know
look?
why that is? Because people are
Wanna go look?
stupid. People are stupid, Scotty. You can't judge by
Now
that.
the people are dumb, TJ. I trust in the people, TJ, to recognize
salt.
genius when they see it.
Yeah.
I love this.
Well, you failed. You
I love
failed.
this.
Well, I
failed and they
TJ.
failed. They're
Then
garbage, you're
then
garbage.
you stand in a shadow of my
You
failure,
stand in a
TJ, 'cause I've
trash heap
eclipsed you.
together.
I eclipse all your episodes, TJ, every time.
Bullshit.
I was
Bullshit.
looking at analytics, TJ.
And I noticed, you know what you
beat
do?
I'm
You know what
sorry,
you do?
TJ,
You
it's a
bury,
fact.
you
You've
bury
lost.
my
You've
episodes.
lost.
You
TJ,
bury
wanna
my
go look? You wanna
episodes
take a look?
because you're
You wanna
jealous
take a
of my
look?
greatness. So you fucking
Oh,
don't
YouTube rigged against you now, too?
push
Oh,
your
I'm
shit
sure
harder
that's
than
right.
me. Oh,
If
it's
you
all
don't win-
bullshit.
If you don't win, it's rigged, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, TJ.
And I want to point that out there.
Oh,
Let me just put this out there before the competition even begins. Let me just say this before the Scotty, come on. Let's be mature. Let's be mature. Let's be mature, Scotty. Scotty, let's be mature.
Let me say one
Let's
thing.
be mature, Scotty. Let's be mature.
Let me just say
Let
one
me be
thing.
mature. Let's be mature, Scotty. Come on.
Let me just say one thing. Let me
Scotty.
Let me just say one thing.
Scotty, let me just say one thing. Let me just say one little tiny thing. One tiny insignificant thing. I just want to say one thing.
Hey, TJ, let me say
One
one
thing,
thing,
Scotty.
man.
One
Let me
thing.
say one thing. No, let me say one thing first.
All right, go ahead.
You're a faggot.
All right. Here's my one thing.
You shouldn't use that word, Scotty.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
bad.
I
That's
That's
not a
no
language.
word. That's
Yeah.
an offensive word.
That's our word. You
I'm
can't use
totally-
that word.
I
Anyway,
totally repent for my sins.
All right.
I'm so sorry.
Sky, let me say one thing to you. If I lose today,
Yeah.
it's because you and Paul cheated and you're in cahoots.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, of course.
All right. You guys ready? I recommend that you focus in here because you can't play the game if you don't know the rules and the premise.
All right.
That's true.
Rules.
Gentlemen, it is one thing to bitch and to whine and to complain about the way things are. All three of us spend an inordinate amount of time doing just that. Is that not true?
True.
Yes. Yes.
It's a relatively simple thing to criticize, as we all know.
Yep.
The man sitting in the bleachers wearing the double beer sipping hat always knows more than the referees, the coaches, and the players on the field. It's easy to see their foibles, mishaps, and doomed strategies, and boy, is it easy to pontificate about how things could have been done better. Is that not true?
Sure.
That's 100% true.
It's another thing entirely to be a man on that field of play, busting your brains against other men who are just as determined as you, doggedly pursuing a possibly flawed strategy and dealing with those consequences. It's another thing still to be the coach on the sidelines, calling the plays, dictating the strategy, and assuming responsibility for the state of the game at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, I ask both of you to come down from the bleachers. I ask you to remove your double beer hats and your mustard-stained jerseys. I ask you to take your place upon the great field of play. No football stadium, mind you. Simple game of football would be far too easy. No, gentlemen. Tonight, the field of play is the earth itself, and you are its masters, emperors, gods, if you prefer. To fix the world and its institutions is the game, or else to tear them down and to remake them functionally.
All right.
A caution before we begin. You will be judged on how livable, equitable, safe, and enjoyable life is for the people living under the systems that you create and institute. Creating a world that only serves your whim, and TJ, I'm talking to you here.
Sure.
I'm going to repeat that from the start. Creating a world that only serves your whim and desire while ignoring your subjects will surely result in a humiliating defeat at the hands of your great opponent, Scotty, here tonight.
Uh-huh. He's cheating. He's looking up fucking solutions.
Nah, you know what I'm doing right now, TJ?
Look at him. He's cheating. He's a cheating
I'm texting you
bastard.
something right now, TJ.
What? What are you texting me?
Oh, wait. You guys are planning something behind my back? That's not allowed. That's not allowed. It's against the rules. It's against the rules.
Do you want to reveal what I texted you?
No.
Okay.
Because it's nonsense.
Okay, fair enough.
So, tonight, I shall be the common person, the hoi polloi, the working stiff. It is I, of course, who must live within the world that you create.
Uh-huh.
And therefore, it's I who must decide which of you has vision and which of you is a simple drunken fan yelling your strategy incoherently from the bleachers.
All right.
But fear not. Lest you think that I might harbor some bias one way or the other, there will be two ultimate judgments made tonight. And the fans will make the second one after the show goes live. They will chime in the comment section, either affirming my choice or providing a measure of redemption for tonight's loser by splitting the decision.
All right. Fair enough.
The outcome, friends, will come down to your ability to sell your world and to make it stand out against your opponents. Now, keep in mind that all your proposed changes must exist in the realm of possibility. I will allow answers which strain that boundary, but pure laughable fantasy will curry you no favor here. Flattery, too, is discouraged. Creating a world just for Paul is no path to victory tonight. I will be considering other people in my judgment to the best of my ability. And remember, the plebs and patrons, as they may be, have their say as well.
All right.
By the same token, I do not expect you to provide a full accounting of how every government agency, bureaucracy, and economic paradigm functions in your reality. That would be boring, and it would defeat the purpose of this thought experiment. Think big ideas and broad strokes, not minutia.
Gotcha.
Okay? I've created a structure for this game, and I'll chime in with questions while keeping a semblance of order. Attempt to the best of your ability to remain focused on the topics and questions at hand. We're going to discuss a broad range of topics tonight, so there should be ample opportunity to put forth any ideas you have as they come up. You'll also each be given time to expound upon any of these ideas or any that you feel aren't covered at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
In addition to selling your own world, it will be your job to poke holes in your opponent's ideas.
Okay.
Interruptions and clarifying questions and critiques are allowed within reason. You have to let people get their ideas out, but I expect you to challenge one another in these. Poke some holes. Try to make the other person uncomfortable. Ask the tough questions. I will also ask questions, I'll keep the conversation moving, and I'm also going to be taking notes so that I can summarize your worlds at the end of the show tonight and render my judgment.
Okay.
Today, the world will change, gentlemen. Will we lay our heads down in Tijonia or Scotopia tonight?
Scotopia.
It's time to find out.
Excuse me.
Are you both ready to play the game?
I suppose.
Yeah, let's play it.
All right. First and foremost, Scotty, call heads or tails in the air. Go.
Okay, tails.
It is heads.
Oh.
So that means TJ, you get to choose whether you go first or Scotty goes first. And
make that bitch go
there.
First.
So
Boom.
So you're going to go first.
That bitch gonna go first.
Oh, Scotty's going
No,
first.
Scotty
I'm
going
going
first.
Gotcha.
Oh man, TJ, I'm ready, dude. You know,
Now remember,
that just shows. I'll just say this, Paul. This just shows TJ's fear of me. Fear is already evident, dude.
It is a fearful. It's like the football team winning the toss and saying,
yeah, we're deferring.
We'll kick. We don't want to.
So we see TJ's strategy coming out the gate. That's fine. All right.
Hey, I'm going to take every advantage I got, man. What the hell? I know this is a rigged contest
I don't think
against
it's an
me.
advantage, TJ. I think it's just going to be like, I'm going to lay out such a good case, dude, that you're about to be destroyed.
Go ahead. Lay out your bitch ass case.
All right, I'm ready.
All right,
Bitch.
Scotty. And TJ, because you need to be listening as well, because you will have to go through the same kind of process.
Gotcha.
So we start with what society is at its elementary level.
I'm going to have to put on my glasses for this one.
Yeah, you got to look smart, TJ. Get smart. Scotty's doing the right thing. Scotty's putting his head in the right space right now, as I can see. He's taking care of business properly, like a man should. And that's good. All right, you feel smarter, TJ?
Yeah, my IQ went up by like 10 points.
All right. So section 1 is called a system of social relationship.
Okay.
Social relationships are the basis of society. The family alone is said to have as many as 15 relationships based on age, sex, and generation. Once you go outside the family, there's theoretically no limit to the number of possible relationships. Just as life is not a thing, but a process of living, society is not a thing, but a process of associating. The meaning of social relationships would be clearer if we could draw a distinction between physical and social relation. So the relationship between pen and ink, earth and sun, a book and bookshelf, fire and wood is a physical relationship because these physical objects do not have any reciprocal awareness whatsoever. On the other hand, social relationships exist between the mother and the child, the teacher and the student, the boss and the underling, the governor and the governed, and they are determined by reciprocal awareness. Without this awareness, there can be no social relationship and therefore no functioning society. So, Scotty, I ask you, question number 1.
Okay.
What common interest would bind people to one another in your society?
I think that the most commonality that people usually have is that, especially to be reciprocated, it's like the golden rule. Shaking his head, whatever. Do unto others as you would want done unto you. So my society would be based around something like that, and mainly empathy and understanding that everyone is basically born into this world, doomed to die. We all have a finite amount of time. Let's try to have as great of understanding of the human experience as possible and be as empathetic as possible and trying to live in a world that does not matter what you look like and how you're born into it. It is as equitable as possible based on those principles. And trying to root out anything that I think would, tear that down, like racism or, look, not everyone's going to be equal in that sense as well. But I would say empathy is important to that, to try to understand why you don't want to judge someone based on their appearance or, if they have a physical disability or something like that. You want to try to make it as equitable as possible based on the common goal of everyone is in this together. And the human race needs to try to come together as much as possible. And I think that's the best way to do it, is empathize with others and understand their plight and try to have them understand yours.
Okay. Now, TJ, you seem to have, feel free to chime in. He's finished.
No, I don't care.
There.
I'm willing to let him just, wax philosophical about this meaningless fucking shithole, dystopian nightmare that he's talking about.
Well, TJ, it's a world that like you grew up in Louisiana, you grew up in the South,
Uh-huh.
and you always felt like judged by people.
Right.
Imagine if people were more open to thinking about what is TJ's life like. He doesn't follow the social norms.
So
here.
is Paul going to enforce his own rules here?
Well,
Yes.
you said,
What do you mean enforce my own rules?
Well, you said, no magical bullshit. Like, oh, I'm going to wave a magic wand over society and like create empathy and stuff.
no, I'm not saying create empathy. I'm saying that
he didn't say
teach
that.
those ideas.
Oh, that's basically
Well,
that's what I heard. I don't know. Maybe I don't understand it.
Okay,
Okay.
well, if you want to clarify that's
Yeah,
all right.
clarify it.
I'm saying that is like
Clarify it like
kind of
butter.
like a pillar of our society. Is that's taught from kids at a very young age. Kind of like people get indoctrinated with religion, get indoctrinated with good things. Like, hey, caring about everyone and the planet and the animals around you is a really good thing. And the reason why is it's going to help the world. It's going to make the world a better place. It's not just you're tearing down this forest, you're tearing down all these animals' homes, you're destroying the environment. Teach people to think about things like the consequences of their actions in a concrete way. It'd be a rational discussion. It wouldn't be based on like magical sky daddy will punish you if you're not empathetic. It wouldn't be based on
All right, so let me
that.
ask you this. What are you going to do about sociopaths? Because if you're going to try to create a society where like the thing that binds people together is empathy. There's a certain segment and there's different varying numbers on what percentage it is.
Sure.
Some have it as high as like 10%,
yeah.
some have it as low as like 5 or whatever.
Well,
but there is a significant chunk of people who are just completely incapable of empathy. So what do you do? How do you address something like that within your system?
This actually goes to another question that I was going to ask you,
Okay.
Scotty. So let me do that, and I believe it's basically the same question, and we'll just call this your second question.
Okay.
How would you foster a sense of commonality amongst humans who are all unique and different?
I would argue that many of those differences are differences that are taught and are very superficial. I think that you can look at it in that perspective, but there's a commonality that we're all of the same species, roughly of the same mental capacity and roughly capable of a lot of the same things. Now, there's distinctions. There's people who are super tall, so like they're better at basketball, of course. We're not born into the world equal, but we try to make things from a legal sense and a societal sense and a cultural sense as equal as possible. You go to TJ's point is there's going to be people that in this system they're not going to fit into that system well. And that's true. The system has to try to adapt to those people, give them as much treatment as possible. But a society that's based on empathy and understanding will understand that some people are incapable of these things, and it's probably not even their fault. So we try to study those issues from a scientific perspective and understand how and why that happens for these people and try to treat them as best as we can in that society under those rules. Obviously not trying to be draconian. And if people commit obviously terrible crimes and acts, then they have to be dealt with, but from a sense of rehabilitating
Well,
them,
the problem is
possible.
The problem is, if I may interject again.
Okay. Well, there's always going to be problems no matter what.
Well, yeah, sure. But I mean, it's my job to throw you curveballs and stuff, right? So
no, I know. I get that. But there's not going to be a perfect system.
So like when we're talking about sociopaths, like, the sociopaths who act out in violent ways are obviously pretty easy to spot. But most sociopaths do not do that, right? Most sociopaths are able to fit into, some sort of paradigm. But the problem is they just lack empathy. So basically, a lot of times they're capable of like gaming the system and stuff because they don't have a lot of the same considerations as other people. And in fact, we see that they flourish in positions like, of authority, particularly because it's very easy for them to look at a group of people and just treat them as, a game of calculus and not factor in personal things. So that's why you have a lot of teachers who are sociopaths,
very
a lot of
Machiavellian kind of
CEOs that are.
schemers. You're saying someone that would maybe.
So I mean, like they're not necessarily super easy to
have all these qualities that my society is like foisting. Oh, these are the best things to do.
So a sociopath is going to be most of them, for the most part, they're going to be really good at like faking the social niceties that they're, and I guess that to some extent it doesn't, if they're faking it convincingly enough, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter that they're actually not empathetic, but the fact that they can selectively turn on and off that empathy.
Well, some of those people, like as you said, inevitably are going to exist,
right?
And that's inevitably going to happen. Maybe that's part of the way that you actually do treat them. Maybe the best treatment is for them to believe that they're getting one over on people. Now you could do, and I think just like we look at everyone's physical health, and we're constantly discussing physical health, like Paul, you told us that you're getting blood work done. TJ, we've all had a medical experience in our lives for the most part, and so to that we always think, okay, well, how's my heart doing? How's this doing? I think that society, what I would want is focus on as well as your physical health is your mental health. And obviously the indicators in our societies and the metrics which we track that would be based on people's reported happiness, the things we think make people happy as best as we can scientifically understand. And that would obviously include psychological screening. So it'd be normal in that population group to try to understand every member of the population. To understand humanity is better, we have to study humans. So that probably mean most people would undergo psychological screenings, or it would be necessary to. And obviously, you would encounter some of those people in the population groups, and then obviously you would try to treat them and diagnose them as good as possible. But maybe in that system, because of the ideals which it holds, even if, like as you said, you might have someone that's like, okay, well, I want to be the top of the empathy game. And I guess even if they're doing it for wrong reasons, if people are aware of it, or even if they're not aware of it, if it's doing good things, I mean, I guess they're gaming a system which is as equitable as possible. I mean, but is it going to happen? I mean, invariably, there's going to be any system could be gamed. Any system could be there could be a flaw found. It's just designing a system.
Scotty admits that his system is flawed.
Every system will be flawed, I believe. I would be doing a disservice.
Maybe your system will be flawed.
You're striving for perfection. You're not saying you're going to attain perfection.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so Scotty has answered 2 of the 3 questions that I have. One will be unique to him, and one will be unique to you, TJ. It is now your turn to sit in the hot seat and to talk about the system of social relationships at the very base of your society that you would foster, starting with the common question between the two of you. What common interest will bind people to one another in your society?
Okay. So as far as common interest goes, I don't know. I reject the idea that there needs to be an absolute common interest between people. I think that I'm more on board with the idea of embracing diversity. So I guess that if you're going to talk about any sort of commonality, it would be to celebrate the lack of commonality. I think that people should be free to pursue their own ends to whatever extent is possible. And I think that there should be a sort of profound respect granted towards people who are following whatever path they feel is correct. Now, I do think there need to be some limitations in terms of if you're doing something that's like hurting other people, then, obviously that should be looked down upon and with the greatest like degree of social scorn and, ostracization. And those people should be, quarantined off from the rest of us in some manner. But as far as like people who just want to pursue, I mean, I would basically base it on like freedom. And I would say, the erosion of any sort of like overarching cultural, like, we all have to share one thing in common. I also think that the family structure should fundamentally change. Right now, if you're a kid and you're raised in a 2-parent household, you're stuck with your 2 shitty potential. I mean, like, obviously some people have great parents, but, if you have 2 shitty parents that are raising you, that's like, we need to go back, I think, to more of a, like, it takes a village kind of fucking mentality of, having, kids be exposed to all kinds of different people and all kinds of different ways of thinking. I think that my society would robustly embrace ideological diversity to a greater extent than any currently existent human society.
Well, I have a question for you. If you have that and you have to promote diversity as much as possible, you're inevitably going to run into conflict because you're going to have different ideas from different groups. Sure. How do you mediate those many conflicts as you increase your diversity as much as possible? Which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But how do you, we know that how belief systems and human nature works. Mm-hmm. And inevitably you're going to run into 2 groups that they just don't get along. They don't agree. Right. How do you deal with that?
I think that should be a sign. I mean, I view that as a positive thing. I don't view it as a negative to say that there's going to be different ideologies that come into conflict. I view that as...
Even if they become violent?
Well, obviously that's why there has to be a very strong social stigma on against, violence and any sort of bringing harm to other people.
But how would that be a commonality? So you said there's a stigma against it.
Right.
You're saying you want a diverse. So some groups might find violence to be an appropriate means to solve a problem.
Look, I mean, in order to have a society like this, the few rules that do exist have to be very rigidly enforced. So I think that they're when it comes down to it, set the minimum amount of rules possible, but allow zero variation. Like, I don't even think violent sort of like speech should be allowed in this society. I don't think that if anybody even starts suggesting like, oh, hey, it's, maybe we should, do some violence or something like
so
that.
In some respects, you'd be authoritarian.
Yes. I think in that one respect, it'd be very authoritarian. But I think that if you were authoritarian on that one issue.
Give me an example. So if me and you have an argument, I say, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Is that a crime in your society?
No. I mean, like if you say some fucking stupid shit in the heat of passion, like that's different. I'm talking about constructing an ideology that builds violence into itself or propagates itself through violence. I think that should
if you allow for maximum diversity, won't that inevitably happen though?
That's why.
Won't some groups find conflict?
Well, that's why you have to. That's why you have to absolutely make that like the. That's why you can have zero tolerance on that. You can't.
But rules are kind of made to be broken.
Right.
Like we know how that. But
happens. I think that if you
repress, human emotions, how do you deal with the human nature of violence?
Well, look, people are going to.
It's in our very biology.
Within the context of my system, people are going to be the least repressed they've ever been at any point in human history. The only fucking rule they have to follow is don't harm others and don't advocate for the harm of others.
Just like you said, there's
if it's hard, in the
system. There's very.
If it's hard for them, then they're going to be removed from the society in one way or another.
Damn, TJ, what does that mean? Is there is that a final solution, TJ?
In my society, there's going to be a state entity that does have a monopoly on that sort of violence.
TJ will give you a nice shower. Would you like one? Oh,
yeah.
Cyclone B. How about Cyclone T?
Cyclone T. I'm down for it. Let's do it. No, seriously. I mean, like, if you can't peacefully coexist with other people that think differently than you, then you have no place in my society.
That's going to be a greatly reduced population.
I don't think so. I think people are going to be robustly happy.
All right.
I think the people that fit within the system will. Sure.
Fair enough.
I mean, like the system is so robust and accepting. The only fucking if people cannot live by the simple fucking edict of
some
not
metrics, TJ, but you know this too, and you know this to be true. Don't deny it.
What
you know this by some metrics, any rule, even one rule, is one too many.
Yeah, well, for those people, those people aren't going to be happy in my society. But I'm here to maximize the happiness of the most amount of people, and I think that if people have the ability and the right to express themselves to the greatest extent possible, then I think most people are going to be completely happy with that system.
So if you agree with that point, then you have to agree with the same point you made about me and the sociopaths.
Which is what?
You essentially have to agree to my argument.
Which is what?
You said the sociopaths will game the system, and I said there's going to be people that are going to game your system.
No, they're not going to get. They ain't gaming shit because my system, in that respect, is going to be totally draconian.
You're basically like, so are you advocating a final solution? Like you're saying, like these people have to be killed.
I'm not saying they have to be killed. I'm just saying they have to be removed from society.
Interestingly enough, TJ's second question, which is unique to him,
okay,
touches on this. I think pretty directly.
All right, let's hear it.
TJ, how would you ensure and reinforce the creation of healthy relationships between your citizens and discourage destructive ones?
Right. I mean, that goes right to the heart of it. I mean, look, as far as encouraging healthy relationships, I think that, just fostering an environment of mutual respect for other people's beliefs is important. I think that a society like what I'm describing only works if there is some sort of overarching edict of, having respect and tolerance for other people, even if you don't necessarily understand the way they're living or understand why they are, choose the lifestyle that they do, but maximizing the freedom for them to make that choice and for you to make your own choices. And
what about instances where that person's freedom and choice overlaps with yours? This person may freely want to just take something that is on your land or.
Well, right. I mean, you still have to
of your land.
You still have to enforce basic property.
Where's the line? Where's the line?
Well, the line is pretty clear. The line is do no harm to someone else.
Okay.
Whether or not stealing their property is a form of harm. I think that's a form of violence against their person and property.
Right, but that's a point of some contention when it comes down to cerern conflicts between humans.
There's always going to be some fuzzy parts of the line, for sure.
You might do something that you believe is not harming a person, and that person believes very deeply that they are being harmed by your actions.
Like what?
Well, let's say harassment.
Right.
Let's say that you see a fat person, you live near one, and you want to encourage them to lose weight because they'll be healthier, and so you call them fat and you call them names every day. And in your mind, you're doing them a good service by encouraging them to lose weight. But in their mind, of course, you are harassing them and making their lives horrible and making them feel horrible about
right.
themselves.
I think that it kind of, I think it boils down to how often this is happening. I think that if you want to make a remark about someone's weight, I don't think that should be something that the state gets involved in. But if there's a degree of harassment there and you can show that this is like willful, constant, malicious, pernicious sort of like, attempts to break their spirit and psyche down through, constant badgering and abusive comments, then I think that would warrant some sort of intervention.
Okay. Anything to add, Scotty? Any clarifying questions?
How the freedom of TJ Land is ever shrinking. Ever shrinking.
Oh, it's free. I mean,
the maximum amount of freedom, you say.
I think you have. I mean, look. There's
no. But then I don't feel you can deliver the maximum amount of freedom. You can't.
No, you can't. I think you can.
Let's be honest.
Look, no, shut up. No.
You can't. Your society
yes, I can.
is fundamentally flawed, and it can't.
No, yes, it can. Listen. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
It's a fucking joke.
Shut up.
It's a fucking joke.
Listen.
I have the floor, and you don't have the floor. You can respond to me.
Okay, go ahead.
You can respond to me.
Go ahead and do your rant. But I already know what you're going to say. I'm going to.
Paul hasn't fucking put you in handcuffs, so you can't respond to what I'm saying.
I'm trying to respond. I know what you're saying. I'm going to fucking respond to it.
No.
All right, go ahead. Get it all out. Get it all out.
It's the maximum amount of freedom in this by which the system you've designed.
But
as the system is obviously in any system is examined further, freedom gets eroded, and you've already made another concession to maximal freedom.
That's not the same. It's the same concession.
Dude.
It's the same standard. Harm.
It is. Yes, sure. It's a standard, TJ. But I'm saying is that by having that standard, eventually you have to curtail freedom. Correct.
Yeah, of course.
So your society cannot ever actually deliver on its promise of maximal freedom.
No, it can.
It can't.
Yes, it can.
Because
I am going to
maximal freedom will be the freedom to do everything you want whenever you want.
Well, no, because that no, wrong.
That is the maximal.
No, it's not.
Freedom,
no, it's not.
Yes,
because
it is. How is it not?
Because in a society where everyone is completely free to do whatever they want with no limitations, then you're going to have a society.
Really
then you're going to have a society where it's like, we're the fucking People's Resistance Militia. Well, we're the new monarchy collective, and then you're going to fucking people are just going to tribalize and segment themselves off.
Well, we didn't say it was going to be long lived.
Well, yeah, no. Maximum. If you give them absolute maximum anarchist level freedom, it's just going to fucking become a bunch of little warring nation states. So my system eliminates that.
Society. You're creating a new authoritarian society.
That's in some respects, freedom does have to be curtailed in order to maximize it and preserve it. So there's no you can't have a completely 100% free society. What I said is that my society provides the maximum amount of freedom possible for all people that is sustainable and will not digress into warring nation states.
How will it not? If it has the maximum amount of diversity.
Because there's still going to be an overarching state power that has a monopoly on violence.
Like what we have now, the diversity of life, and this is what we have now. So it's kind of hard. It's almost far-fetched to believe humanity is going to get its act together unless you're very authoritarian.
Oh, well, but your fucking very society of infinite empathy, of course, is totally plausible.
Mine is completely plausible, TJ. And you know it. You know it's true, TJ.
Yeah.
I am so fucking happy that I decided to do this show at this point in the show. We're so early in the show, and I'm loving this argument. This is fucking fantastic. Okay. So in the interest of keeping the discussion moving along,
sure,
we are going to move to our next area of discussion. And in this one, because Scotty went first last time, now I leave it up to you guys. What do you think is more fair? Should I have another coin flip decided, or should we just switch back and forth from here on out?
You just decide what you want. I don't care.
Yes, if you want to switch or whatever you want to do.
Let's just switch back and forth from here on out then. So TJ will start this one, but first listen to the premise, okay?
Okay.
The premise number 2, the basis of society, likeness and difference.
Okay.
Likeness of members of a social group is the primary basis of their mutuality. It may be, in the beginning, an assumed or real common lineage, tribal affinity, family benefit, or a compactness due to common living area. Likeness means mutuality, and that means society. Comradeship, intimacy, association of any kind or degree would be impossible without some understanding of each by the other. And that understanding depends on the likeness which each apprehends in the other. Likeness is the one element which must have which must have strongly stimulated the group feelings in bringing men, women, and children together. However, a 100% organized society is not possible. It's a myth. For society to run smoothly, there must be some differences. If people were exactly alike, their social relationships would be very limited. There would be little to no reciprocity, no give and take. They would contribute very little to one another. They would have nothing to contribute. A society based exclusively on likeness or uniformity is bound to lose. Life would be boring, monotonous, prosaic, and uninteresting if differences were not present. So, with that in mind, the idea of likeness and difference in the people that are in your society, I start with you, TJ. Mm-hmm. What balance of ideological likeness and difference would you find healthy and allowable in your society?
Allowable, huh?
So I leave that up to you.
Okay, so first of all, like I said earlier in my previous answer, my society is kind of based upon ideological diversity. So, this idea of likeness is not going to be extraordinarily important, but I do understand there have to be some sort of commonality between people.
There have to be. You have to address it. If everybody, if every man, hold on, TJ. If every man is an ideological island, your society will not function.
Sure.
The extent of which you want people to be
right, there has to be some commonality in terms of the
likeness.
Gotcha.
And there has to be a balance between that likeness and the type of diversity that you're talking about.
Right. I think that the thing you could do the most to kind of maximize that is to kind of foster a sort of like commonality that's just based on our shared genetic lineage with all other human beings. I think fostering sort of a humanist mentality to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, not everyone's going to get on board with it, but if you can get enough of society on board with a sort of humanist perspective and sort of a respect for, I care about other people because they are my same species, and kind of try to bring it, take it away from like the level of race or tribe or culture, whatever the fuck. And in fact, I think that the erosion of those things would probably be something my society would encourage. But I think that when it comes to finding commonality, I think, mutual respect for other human beings, fostering that to the greatest degree possible, and also sort of having a sort of reverence for humanity as a species and as an institution to some extent in my society as well.
I will say this to that. I don't think there's anything bad about that. So I don't really have any problems with that at all.
Well, I have a clarifying question before Scotty jumps in real quick. Where do other species stand? Where's the ecological argument stand? If we base your society around this reverence of the human being, does that mean to the exclusion of the natural environment?
No, I think that there should be some. I think that to some extent, I think you appeal to the vanity and ego of man by putting ourselves in the position of like we are the caretakers of this planet. Even if that's not really true, I think that's probably a healthy sort of idea to propagate.
And Scotty, you said you didn't have much disagreement with what
No.
TJ had to say.
Not at all.
That's fine. Hey, look, I want there to be honesty, so you don't have to needle the guy if you don't think that there's anything wrong with what he said. One more question for you. Today, TJ, before we move on to Scotty's chance to tackle this. What role would those that disagree with the way that you do things play in your society?
I mean, it depends on the nature of the disagreement, right?
It also depends on whether or not you are the leader of your society.
Yeah, I haven't really been thinking of myself as the leader of the society. I've just been thinking about a society that I would want to live in.
Well, you're creating it though,
right?
So
but I'm creating it in the moment. So,
right.
So, I guess it depends on the nature of the disagreement. So, I mean, like I said, this society prizes a diversity of opinions and outlooks. So, I think as long as they weren't violating that core tenet of not doing harm or advocating for harm to other people, then they would be, respected, and they'd be looked at as like, oh, well, that's their opinion, and that's their idea about how society should be run. And I think that we can listen to them and carefully consider what they have to say. But if they start advocating harm, then obviously it's a totally different story.
And Cyclone T.
Zyklon T. That's when the Zyklon T gets broken out.
Okay. Maybe not a whole lot of disagreement on this one. Do you have anything to add to that one, Scotty?
No, not really.
Okay, so I throw it to you then. The common question being, what balance of ideological likeness and difference would you find healthy and allowable in your society?
Okay. Well, first off, the way I look at it is this. The world, people used to be divided into, small family groups, then tribes, then city-states, then, countries and all this. We just foster the natural progression of humanity to, look, we now have a global society. And this is how the best way for the planet to function is if all these groups of humans work together in concentration on these areas of concern. Like, we're talking about our world, the environment is a huge area of concern. And maximizing empathy, thank you, TJ. We would think about the profound impacts on the environment, on the things we do, not only on animals, but on ourselves. We look at pollution in cities. With COVID-19, people have talked about, wow, the skies are clearer. There's so many things and decisions that individuals make that they don't realize what the ultimate impact of those decisions are. Throwing away something might seem like a trivial action, but then eventually you have rivers filled with sludge and plastic bottles. So we have to bring humanity together in a sense that if we let these old divisions rule us, if we let it be about countries and that, so we have to really instill in people, that's the point I agree with TJ on, a sense of a human institution, of that we're the most intelligent species on this planet. We have to take care of the planet, and we have to take care of ourselves. And the best way to do that is to make sure of the best possible outcomes with individuals and society as a collective. Now, the difference is, I still think, obviously, look, people are going to be different. I think we hold the past and past cultures with some reverence still, but from a historical perspective, we try to foster more of like, this is how we were. This is how it was in this time, because people seem to like to look back at the past, and we look back at the past as a cautionary tale, and we study it, and we see that there were a lot of differences, and some of those differences led to strengths, and some of them led to weaknesses. And try to have as a critical.
How would you prevent people from looking at this the past and maybe you wouldn't want to prevent it. I don't know, but I think part of the problem of this preservation of the past. I mean, sure, people can learn lessons from history, but
historically,
another problem is that people start to identify with certain groups in history, and then they're like, oh, look at my group had this oppression happen to them, and they had, or like maybe some other person looks at like, oh, we were conquerors or whatever, and like they start to like identify themselves as just another chain in this like narrative, and then it kind of forces a certain tribalization to start happening. Like, how would you keep them like at a clinical distance from it? Because obviously, I think that viewing yourself as a continuation of the lineage of like this chain that extends ever from ever backward into the past, like people see like, oh, my people were wronged here, or that we did this great thing here, or whatever, and then they start, my people are the best people, or my people have been oppressed, or whatever the fuck, and then they don't focus on the now. They like want to relitigate the past. How do you prevent that from happening?
It's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure how you would prevent the past from affecting the future. I don't think you can do a sense, but I think in the best sense we can do is try to understand why those actions occurred and the grievances that people had, and try to show people that world is a world of the past and not the world of the future. And yes, there's going to be people, I think, they're going to go back and argue for the past, but you have to give people and offer people something tangible, concrete that offers them a better life. And if most people feel that their life is better under the new way of things and this new world order, they'll probably accept that. People live in a very, like we live in the moment. People don't think in long term. People don't think in the past as much, like maybe in a nebulous sense. I feel if what you're offering people is better and what they have is better, and there's less poverty and famine, and we're dealing with these problems and people are seeing the concrete changes, maybe some people want to go back to the past, but those people are going to be defeated by the idea of the future is better. It's more equitable. People are not starving as much, or we're trying to eradicate disease. We're working on all these issues seriously and critically. That's the world that people want. If you can give that and hand that to them in a concrete way, that's where they're going to accept that, as opposed to the old way when they did not have those things and lived lives of deprivation and poverty and exploitation.
All right. TJ, anything to add before we move on to our next section?
No, I asked my clarifying question.
All right. Fair enough. Interesting discussion so far. We're going to move on to our third area of discussion. This one is called interdependence. Society implies interdependence. It's another essential element to constitute a society. It's not possible for a human being to satisfy his desire in total isolation. Right. Do you agree with that premise?
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Okay. A man cannot live alone. He needs the help of others for his survival. Society fulfills all the needs of the people. For example, the institution of family rests on biological interdependence of the sexes. None of the two sexes is complete by itself, and therefore each seeks fulfillment by the aid of the other. The fact of interdependence is very much visible in the present-day society. Today, not only countries, but also continents are interdependent upon one another.
Sure.
Likewise, communities, social groups, and nations are also interdependent. So with that in mind, Scotty, you going first on this one.
Sure.
How would people need one another in your society, and how might it differ from our current reality?
Look, people completely need one another, and it's obvious. I mean, look at this thing with the coronavirus. You had people that were in dire need of things, PPE, supplies, and because of a system of exploitation, those things are hard to come by. Society can't reorient itself and say, there's a pandemic. What is in the best interest of every person on this planet? So you essentially, trying to think of it.
Okay, ooh, stumbling, stumbly wumbly. I win. Let's just fucking admit it. I win. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. To be honest with you, Paul, I'm not gonna lie. I totally forgot the premise of this question because my fucking stoner brain kicked in. So
it's okay. I can ask you.
I'm just being honest.
I'll read it again. How would people need one another in your society?
Okay, how would people need one another?
And how might it differ? How might it differ from the current reality?
Okay, well, back to that point. Look, everyone needs one another, and it's obvious. You know, I don't fucking grow my own food. You don't grow your own food. You don't most of the clothes we're wearing came from somewhere else. We all realize that we really in any system are going to be totally dependent on everyone else around us. If we're talking about a system of trying to be as equitable as possible, that means the people doing things that they're doing. If it's still a fiat currency system, I don't know what the best system is. I mean, hopefully it'll be post scarcity, but if it's not, that people are as fairly compensated as possible for what they're doing to enrich your lives and what you're doing to enrich theirs. And I feel like that's the best exchange possible that you can have. And is that trying to
remember you can design the economic system in this world as well. So fiat currency doesn't have to be a necessity.
Oh, so it doesn't have to. Okay, well, if we're talking about, because I was trying to be as practical as possible. Let's say it was post scarcity, then people's lives will be based on their own personal achievements. Like if you're talking about a competition of like the spirit of why people are going to want to work together, because they want to do things. They're going to want to it's like, you know, the person that before had to work in a factory, if they want to compose an opera or a work of art, they can spend their life dedicated to that. That doesn't mean that's a guarantee for their goal because other people are going to be in competition with them. You know, we compete with ideas. We compete with the things that people can achieve. And that's going to mean people working against each other and working with each other. But that's going to give people a common purpose in life. And I mean, look, there's people that have every sort of passion. And some people are going to see like, hey, if I can be the best, you know, farmer I can be or the best whatever I can be, and people are going to come together in groups to do those things. And there's going to be people, it's like, there's always going to be a speciality and there's always going to be a common interest. And I think where there's a common interest, people are going to try to meet those desires. And if for some reason there isn't, like, you know, there's not enough of this thing, then society looks at the problem critically and says, hey, these are the areas that we're underinvesting in. These are the things we're not considering, and these are the things that are falling by the wayside. These are the things we have to encourage. Like, let's say like there's no new research into certain medicines that are needed. Instead of just saying, oh, well, you know, people have decided, it's like we see the critical need and we try to fulfill that need and reorient our society towards those problems that come up. Because always going to be problems. It's always going to be problems we're going to have to deal with. There's not going to be this utopia where there's, oh, everything's perfect. We're always going to have to reorient ourselves to things and the data we use. And that's why we have to be very scientific in our approach. And we have to study each other as much as possible. That's why I said at the beginning, like, I want humanity studied. I want to be studying everything about ourselves, our social systems, and trying to come up with the best possible solutions. And interdependency is obviously something that it goes hand in hand with all of that.
All right. Anything to add to that, TJ, before we move on to his second and final question?
I don't feel I have to add anything to that mush mouth nonsense.
I do grant you that I forgot the premise. About 2 minutes in.
Yeah, no, I'm
right. TJ throwing a little shade.
Yeah.
It's well deserved. Forget what you're talking about. That's well deserved.
Scotty, how would you handle people in your society who take more than they give, and the disgruntled feelings that come with being deprived?
I don't think that you're entirely ever going to stop that. I mean, if you look at kids, if you have a bunch of chips or something in a bowl, and there's one kid that's bigger than another one, like I said, it's me and TJ. Fat ass TJ wants most of the chips, he's going to get them. And obviously, I'm going to be upset about it. One of the things I can do, and a lot of parents, you have to just deal with it. We have to really listen to our feelings and become more in touch emotionally. I feel.
Goddamn.
And I know that, and these things are going to happen. Now, the kid example, that's just teaching that older child empathy. That's saying this is what you did was wrong, and at first that's not going to really do much. But if we teach that lesson over and over again, our society is going to be filled with people with those ideas and idealizing those things. Now, on a greater level, let's say, I'm, this businessman, or I'm trying to do this. In my system, that wouldn't make any sense because there's no money to be made. You're not going to make more money. You're going to have more achievements. You're going to have more social credibility because you're doing things to further the human experience, to further what we can do as a species. But I guess the best way to deal with someone on a societal level that's taking too much is examine the problem, examine why the problem is happening, and is it a problem that society needs to intervene in? And I think that's really what you have to do. You have to critically study and examine it and see what the best outcome is. And if the best outcome is to stop that behavior, then you stop that behavior. If it's not, then you let it proceed.
What lengths are you willing to go to in order to stop that behavior? And if you deem it to be something that needs to be
so it is a problem. Then
it's a problem.
Then you take whatever steps are necessary. Now, does that mean? Are you saying would there be violence? I mean, I think violence would be seen as the last resort to any sort of problem. I mean, the absolute final resort, that if there was no other possible solution, then I guess that would be on the table. Like, you can't say it's impossible that there couldn't be violent altercations. I mean, people are going to get upset with one another. It's going to happen. So violent intervention by the state, that would be done with the utmost care and the utmost consideration of every possible solution being exhausted within reason. I mean, obviously, if someone's going and blowing people while you're doing some crazy thing, then obviously people have to be more reactive to that. But try to be as proactive as possible with the population. Try to make sure the population is as monitored as well as possible for their mental health would be a paramount goal. As far as like groups or factions engaging like in violence or taking things from people, that's obviously something you have to deal with because that's a societal problem. That's a breakdown of society. So you do have to deal with that. But you try to do it in a rehabilitative sense. Try to find the core of like that. Like I want that person studied. Like if someone's taking something from somebody, why are they doing it? And not just saying you've done this thing, so you're bad. So now we're going to punish you. Like, why is this person taking this thing from this person? Why is this group doing this? What is the reason for this? Because there's got to be some sort of reason. Instead of just trying to be, reactive to problems, let's try to be proactive to problems. Let's try to fucking go deep into the psyche of these people and these groups and try to figure out what is the underlying cause.
Sound like you just want to coddle them criminal, boy. No, I actually agree with them. I'm just fucking with them.
All right. So, TJ,
yes.
I kick the question to you on the subject of interdependence in society.
Interdependence, right? Okay.
The common question that both of you answer: how would people need one another in your society, and how might it differ from our current reality?
I think that people would need one another in my society for pleasure, the pleasure of companionship, the pleasure of sexual exploration, the pleasure of meaningful conversation, the pleasure of learning together, sharing experiences, hobbies, things of that nature. I think that people already in our society need each other for those things, but unfortunately, so much of their time is spent laboring and all these other things that you don't really get to necessarily enjoy the level of recreation you normally would want. And if people don't want to associate with each other or be interdependent, I mean, obviously there's always going to be some interdependence because, it's a society, but, I think people who don't seek out other people for pleasure don't have to, obviously. But as far as the interdependence of the economic thing, I don't know how deeply I should get into economics here. I don't know if there's economic questions forthcoming, but I think that just in a general sense, I don't believe in necessarily the total dismantling of all monetary systems that are currently existent. I do think that we should maybe have an eye towards that, but I think that you need to have intermediary steps. So I'm going to talk about maybe an intermediary transitional sort of term, because I don't know how far in the future we're talking here with this society. But I think that ultimately, keep some of the market infrastructure intact. But I think what really needs to change is that people need to be guaranteed a certain standard of living. And I think there need to be some fundamental, we need a fucking reappraisal of what the fundamental rights of a human being are. And I think that should include housing, access to food, access to certain avenues of pleasure, basically a cradle to grave nanny state, honestly, which I know is something that, a conservative might hear and be like, whoa, I want to work for, but fuck that. No, I think that, you guarantee housing, clothing, food, shelter, pleasures, things of that nature. Now, you give people the opportunity, I think, to work extra for more, do something productive for society. You get a little bit extra. But I think that there has to be a baseline standard of happiness and education, and if people are sleeping on the streets, that needs to be looked at as unless that's their pleasure. If they want to do that, I guess they can. But I think you need to create a society where there's a baseline standard of living that is acceptable to a human being. And basically,
a lot of people just say those people.
If people want to work, it should be for the extra. Sorry, go ahead.
If you're guaranteed everything. Well, not everything, but to a base level,
baseline, right? Baseline standard of living. Yeah.
Won't that lead to a lot of people? And there's the argument just be against that, just the old argument of you'll have all these people, and they'll just be layabouts and they'll do nothing.
Yeah, I think
then they get their fucking voucher to go get laid at the fucking whorehouse. You know what I mean?
I think that there's a real concern about some people. I mean, if some people want to do that, go ahead. I mean, if that's the lifestyle you want to live, but I think
that lead to social stagnation, though.
No, because I really think that most people fundamentally want to do things. I don't think most people want to just kind of sit around and ooh. You see how crazy this lockdown is making a lot of people, for instance. I mean, I don't think most people want to just sit around and be not productive.
But a lot of that's recreation. Imagine if you had this society, but you could do whatever you want.
Human beings, invariably want to be hierarchical. There's something in us that wants to get a little bit ahead. I don't think you should totally remove those elements of competition from society. I think you should have a baseline guarantee of certain things, but people are always going to want a little more. People are always going to want a little bit better than what their neighbors got, and so on and so forth. And if they realize, hey, if I do this function for society, I can have above the baseline.
But won't that?
I think we just need to look.
But what if someone gets really successful in your system?
Here's society.
Way more.
Right. Here's society. Right. Okay. Yeah. So here's the bottom of society. What I would advocate is lifting this up, narrowing the parameters. And I'd also say lowering this down. I would say you don't want a society where you have super wealthy people that have ultra high concentrations of wealth, like billions of dollars, or we have more than the bottom fucking 50%.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that
I would say that there has
intact,
there has to be there should be a wealth cap. There should be a point where it's you've made enough money, you're good. But I also think that there should be a point where I don't think there should be a point where you're in poverty and destitution. You know what I mean?
But wouldn't that staunch the creative drive that you mentioned before? If there was just some kind of ceiling, wouldn't that keep some people from pursuing all that they could pursue?
If someone's like, hey, I don't want to bother pursuing my goals because I'm capped at $100 million or something, then fine, then fucking sit your ass and be miserable.
So you think the cap should be as high as something like in current dollars in our current economic situation?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that. I don't.
What would the cap be?
I don't think it's. I mean, I don't know. Well, okay, I guess I have to choose. If I had to choose a cap, I'd say $50 million.
Based on our current economic situation and the value of money now.
Right, yeah, sure. If we're going to put it into modern money, I'd say something around $50 million. I think people should be able to achieve wealth and extravagance for their labor, but I don't think that they should be able to have like wealth that rivals nations and stuff.
Well,
like
wouldn't that wealth also just continue to exacerbate the imbalance of political influence that wealth would have? Of course, a person that has a $50 million yearly income.
Oh, I'm not talking. I'm talking.
Just
overall.
Okay, a $50,000 net worth.
I'm talking $50 million net worth, and then like beyond that, you got to downgrade or something, or you got to give it all.
A person that has that much power, if that's the top of the pyramid, so what you've done is you've created a new top of the pyramid.
Look, here's the thing. I know what you're getting at. I know what you're driving at. Right. But here's the thing about in humanity. I don't believe, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't believe you can create a system without some form of social hierarchy. I think people are driven towards that. I think that the best you can do is limit it. I think if you try to eliminate it completely, you're going to create mass dissatisfaction.
Would your wealth cap apply to businesses as well?
I don't know that businesses, as we think of them, would necessarily exist in the society I'm talking about.
Okay, well, how would people get goods and services?
Well, I view it as I think that businesses would exist in a more of a sense of like a worker-owned cooperative. The businesses would not be like, I'm the CEO of the business or whatever. It'd be like,
so people would not be allowed to
voted,
right. It would be like
voted
yeah, there would be
workers.
There'd be Democrat. It would be a workplace would be a democracy.
Well, you said there's a hierarchy too. So
right.
what if companies?
Well, I mean, there's still going to be a hierarchy in terms of like obviously people are going to vote like the workers can't vote on every single little decision. They're going to delegate like this is the person who's going to make these kind of decisions. This is the person that's going to make these kind of decisions, or this council is going to do this or whatever.
So basically, no one will be allowed to start a business. I mean, obviously, it's a single person business. I'm sure that's not an issue.
Like a sole proprietor. Look, if we're talking about a sole proprietorship or something, or like an ice cream parlor, I don't know that necessarily everything has to be a co-op, but I think that beyond a certain level.
Okay, interesting. All right, I've taken quite a bit of notes on that question. The second question, one that was unique to you. What happens in your society to those who refuse to fulfill their part of this social contract that we're talking about?
Refuse?
And how,
in what way?
Yeah, just outright refuse. And how is selfishness managed in your society? So you're talking about everybody having a baseline.
I would hope that as far as people who refuse, I mean, their refusal is meaningless. They can sit in their house all day and play video games. I don't care what they do. They can totally be divested from my society. They're not going to turn down the free housing and stuff. And if they do, then I mean, that's their choice. I mean, I'm not concerned with them. If as far as I don't see there being a significant amount of people being like, we refuse the food, clothing, and shelter that you're offering to provide for us because whatever. I don't know.
Well,
if they exist, then they go ahead and they can do that. I guess.
Wouldn't a huge issue with this be though? Because you're still in a fiat currency based system, correct?
Possibly. I don't know. We haven't gotten to that yet.
One system that you outlined. If you're not, then that question doesn't apply.
Right. I would say, we're on a fiat currency. Sure.
Okay. Well, what do you do about the massive inflation that's going to cause? Because basically, suddenly, if people have invested, so let's say you do away with this old system, you have this new system. Mm-hmm. People had mortgages and all this stuff. Are those just done away with? The society just says, hey, the government's now paid for your house, so you own the house. Well, the government. By you. Who owns the house? Does the government own the house, or do you own the house? You're saying the government's guaranteed the housing.
I would say that the house is collectively owned by the people.
Okay, but private property
that's
rights
represented through
abolished.
That's represented through a state. Housing. No, I wouldn't say they're completely abolished. Like I said, there's minimum standard housing, which I think is like kind of like publicly owned housing that is assigned to you.
How do you prevent the ghettoization of minimum standard housing?
The ghettoization?
Yeah. How do you?
Wait, I don't even feel. Well, I'm not trying to avoid that question, but I don't think I fully answered the questions you already posed.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
So could you re-ask that, because I don't think I actually addressed the question.
The question is, what what happens to those who refuse to fulfill their part of the social contract?
And I answered that part, but there was a second part.
And how is selfishness managed?
Oh, selfishness. Okay, so I think the selfishness is, like I said, it's incorporated into the hierarchical structure. So I guess that I already answered that in the previous question.
Right,
so,
but what about the problems that it
so
creates?
the ghetto.
What about worker-owned?
Well, look, I think that when we're talking about ghettoization, whatever you said, I mean, like,
I was talking about
baseline housing.
You're talking about baseline housing.
Right.
How do you, in a society where people can still get money and still buy mansions?
Yes.
How do you prevent the same problem of the minimum standard? Because, we have kind of an analog now in Section 8 housing.
Right.
And Section 8 housing is basically what you're talking about. I mean, on a smaller scale. And much of the Section 8 housing is horribly, horribly situated. It's crime ridden. It's run down. It's horrible.
Well, I think that if you believe that the root cause of crime is poverty, then you simply eliminate poverty.
But you're not eliminating poverty with your idea here, though.
Yes. Yeah. You're eliminating poverty.
You're providing you're providing a baseline and creating a new fucking
you're creating
water
a better
level
standard
for poverty.
Basically, you're creating a new standard.
Well, look,
I
I think if like that's okay. So if I say everyone gets a mansion, but some people get mega super mansions, then it's like, oh, well, the people in the mansions are still in poverty. No, that's retarded. Poverty is defined by lack of material resources that enable you to live your life. Like, people commit crimes because it's like they can't put food on the table, or because they fucking have to support a drug habit because they got addicted to drugs because their lives are so miserable.
Let me give you an example then.
Okay,
a guy in your society who you talked about how you thought that people should chase their passions.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
A guy in your society living in minimum basic housing wants to be a jet ski activist, or a jet ski stuntman in the worst way.
Right.
But of course, he doesn't have access to the capital for that.
Right.
And perhaps all the worker-owned cooperatives aren't hiring in his area.
Sure.
And so he is now forced into a position of watching all these rich fucks drive around on their jet skis. You see where I'm going with this?
Sure.
You've created a new underclass.
Right.
Well, they're not starving anymore.
Yeah.
They're not sitting out underneath the bridges and overpasses anymore. But they're still like the little fucking orphan kids with their faces pressed up against the fucking department store window at Christmas time, looking at the toy displays and all the shit they can't have.
So if he wants to become a jet ski stuntman, then I would say I don't know why the worker-owned co-ops wouldn't be hiring in his area. I guess we're talking about like during a time of like economic
they're
sort of downturn or something like that.
The same. You're
right.
Keeping the market intact.
They're still going to be subject to certain market forces. I got you. So there are going to be times when, there's not going to be
there's less demand.
There's going to be less demand or something like that. So I think in the case,
maybe he's disabled. Maybe he can't work in any of the co-ops.
Well, if he's disabled, if he's disabled, he's going to make a pretty shitty jet ski.
Well, maybe he's disabled
man.
in a way that would keep him from working, but not disabled in a way that would keep him from enjoying a jet ski.
Well, in that case, I think that maybe he could apply for some sort of government loan or grant.
A jet ski land?
Why not?
A jet ski
look,
grant?
if he's able to go to some sort of council and say, "Look, I want to pursue this new career. This is the business opportunity that I feel I can pursue."
Denied.
And I have no ability to raise the capital myself to do this. Then I see no problem in the government saying, "Hey, okay, well, if you're serious about this and you want to be a jet ski stunt person, we'll give you a fucking jet ski. Here you go."
But the government also functioned the same way by cooperative. So, like, the government would, like, people within the government would vote so, like, let's say if you're running a government department, like, the people want to maintain these baseline housing.
Yeah.
And they all get together and they say, you know what, the people who live there are just, I don't like the way they act. I don't like the way they look. Let's not even bother maintaining that.
Right.
Let's all vote collectively and say it's a good idea never to maintain those buildings again because we just don't like those people.
Right.
Or one of the worker-owned cooperatives.
What would you do?
Think about it from this way too. Or if one of the worker-owned cooperatives, one of these big worker-owned cooperatives got huge and decided that this place where all these people are living in the minimum housing would be better as another chunk of their worker-owned cooperative, another worker-owned cooperative mart or something.
Well, look, I mean, like every society that's worth a shit is going to have some sort of codified constitution. So I think that there's going to be, my society would have a constitution to prevent those sorts of things.
Well, our society has a fucking constitution.
Right.
And people get their homes stolen out from under them every day.
Our constitution, unfortunately, allows for things like eminent domain.
So you're saying you have a provision like of imminent, but you said,
I mean, look,
there's strange. Look, it's collectively
society
owned
has,
by
look,
the people.
Hold on. Like, you're fucking gish galloping me here. Society has to have some kind of
gish galloping.
Well, no, because you guys are like putting multiple questions forward at the same time and not giving me time to answer them. That's fucking gish galloping.
I just like the term.
Oh, so he's getting salty.
No, I'm serious. But no, look, I'm sorry. What was the?
I've never been accused of gish galloping.
What was the topic at hand?
Ahead.
What was the topic at hand? I forget which one. Well, you guys asked so many questions in rapid succession. I forget which one I was answering.
I think it might be better if we just move on to the next segment. We've been lingering on unless there's some final thought either one of you has on interdependence. Let's get into culture.
Sure.
And TJ, you'll get a chance to talk more at length here about this one because you're going first.
Culture
in the order. Every society is unique because it has its own culture.
Mm-hmm.
Culture is a thing which only human beings possess, as far as we can tell. Now, some animal species have shown rudimentary signs of having culture, but certainly nothing that we would call an actual culture. It refers to the social heritage of man. It includes our attitude, moral values, beliefs, ideas, ideologies, our institutions, political, legal, economic, our sciences, our philosophies. Culture encompasses all of that. So it's an incredibly dense topic.
Mm-hmm.
The members of a society pretty much have to share a common culture, one way or the other, for the society to function. Now, maybe yours doesn't, but my contention is that they do. And I ask you your first question here, TJ.
Okay.
What cultural touchstones would your society have?
Touchstones?
Yeah, cultural touchstones.
What do you mean by touchstones? I'm not familiar with the
what
term.
Cultural, what would be the cultural center of your society?
I think I've already described some of the commonality, but I think
but what would be some of the ideas and institutions that would form the basis of those kind of commonly recognized cultural icons in your country?
Right. I mean, I'm fundamentally opposed to some sort of overarching culture for the most part. I think that you want as minimal of it as possible, and I've already kind of discussed in the answer to my first question sort of the fuck you too, bitch. I've already sort of addressed some of the overarching stuff that I think you have to have in place, because I mean, obviously there has to be some commonality for a society to function, but I think you want as minimal of that as possible.
Well, what would people turn to though?
Look,
what would be some of the big?
I think that if you're going to try to create any sort of overarching cultural narrative within the society I'm talking about, I think it should be a very humanist narrative. I think it should be one that venerates man and man's accomplishments. And when I say man, I mean mankind, humankind. I'm not talking about men specifically. And I think that, but for the most part, I think that a robust array of subcultures that are, based not on lineage or heritage, but on choice and personal sense of identity is much healthier than being.
Doesn't that lead to sectarianism?
Right. Yeah. That's why you have to have that strict no violence policy.
Right, but you can we have a strict no violence policy here in America.
Right,
one of the most violent places in the world.
Well, there's a lot of factors there. There's socioeconomic factors to that. There's a gun culture here. There's a fucking, a level of comfort, I think, with violence that is, there hasn't been a proper crackdown. Like, just because you pass a law that says you can't hurt something, there has to be some sort of, that's why I talked earlier in my first answer about there need to be the sense of like ostracizing anybody who fucking embraces that sort of rhetoric. And
but what is it? What does that mean? So let's say I get ostracized. What does that mean?
Okay.
What does that mean in the society? Like,
let's say you're out there. Let's say you're out there and you've created a new like Paulism or something, and one of the tenets of Paulism is that all non-Paulites must be violently destroyed or something. Okay. So the first stage of that, I think, would be, you're removed from polite society. You're not allowed to engage with the businesses of society or any of that stuff.
So Paul's in prison?
Yeah, I mean, well, no, I'd say the first stage is like you're not in prison; you're just kind of like pushed off to the margins. But if
I
it
can't
continues
engage with the businesses, how can I live?
Yeah, how's he going to live? So Paul is pushed off.
Yeah,
of, you know,
so that's kind of the point: is you need a strong deterrent against violence. So yeah. So
you remove that baseline from Paul.
Yeah, basically, if he changes his ways and says, "Look, Paulism now renounces violence, and we are a peaceful group," then okay, well, you're invited back into society. No harm, no foul.
Chooses at that point not to invite Paul back, and they say, "You know what? We don't really believe you. You say now you're nonviolent. We don't believe."
Right.
It.
I mean, he's going to have to do some things to demonstrate his sincerity for sure.
I mean, how are you going to manage 1,000 different Paulisms cropping up all over the place?
I don't foresee that being a thing. But if it was, then I guess you'd have to deal with it in an even harsher manner.
Damn, Zyklon T, dude. It always comes back to it. TJ wants to give you a nice shower. You do not like TJism? Oh, it's no problem.
I mean, it is interesting, the dichotomy between TJ's language at the very beginning of this, where he talked about maximizing freedoms and how increasingly draconian we're getting as we.
How is it draconian? It's fucking. This is so absurd. You're saying that you should be able to, if you want a society where you're allowed to go out and fucking condone violence against other groups and say like, I want to murder people. No society should give you that freedom. Fuck you. No, fuck
agree.
you. You're retarded if you want that. It's draconian to fucking say that people shouldn't fucking go out and advocate murder and violence against one another. That's not draconian. Yeah, when that happens though, you're damn right my society's going to get draconian because we want to defend the fucking freedoms of everyone, and if you threaten that freedom by fucking advocating for violence, then fuck you, you're dead. Zyklon T, bitch.
I do want to the gas chambers. You've crossed me for the last time, Paulites.
I don't think we'd be Zycloning people. I think we'd just probably be putting them in some kind of jail or re-education center or something. But you
go to
the gulag. You go to the fucking gulag. I don't know what to tell you.
I think they're gonna make a state like prison state, TJ, like Wyoming, one of those fucking
maybe what? Maybe the people who want that they can go. We'll put them off in like some little cordoned off area. This is anarchy land where freedom is truly maximum. Go see the results of your fucking advocacy for violence, and they can all just kill each other there. Maybe I'll give them their little paradise as well.
World, dude.
Here's why I pointed it out.
Yeah.
Not because I disagree necessarily that you have to have some sort of draconian measures for certain things.
Yeah, you're way more authoritarian than I am.
But here's the thing. Well, here's the thing, though. Yeah. You didn't even make an attempt in either instance that you went draconian this evening. I've taken notes about both of them.
Yes.
You didn't even make an attempt to try and socio-engineer your way around the problem, especially given the total control I've given you. Hold on, let me finish. It was very easy and very immediate for you to go straight to the jackboot. Straight to the Truncheon, straight to the fucking Gestapo and the Gulag. Mm-hmm. There was no talk about socio-engineering people. No talk about education. No talk about
my society
re-education of people who have stepped out of line. It was all immediate.
My society already has fucking been socio-engineered to that point. So obviously anybody who's not with the program at that point is not capable of being indoctrinated by my society, which is why they have to be removed.
A harsh proclamation.
Damn, TJ.
I'm sorry.
Change. I'm out in the cold here, TJ.
Like I said, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I think about it, the more I think about it, the more I'm down with the idea of here's the land of the lawless. You're not satisfied with the freedoms offered by my society? Here's lawless land where you just get to do whatever you want and let them fucking murder each other.
TJ-topia, dude.
Yeah. It's the pressure valve.
Let's arm all
the people who don't fit in, they're shipped off.
My entire opposition to my society in one place. TJ, your society's doomed.
Gonna put it because look, they're not. Are they gonna form a collective over there? No, they're gonna murder each other. They're gonna fucking murder and rape and maim.
They're gonna form a collective.
This sounds like the plot to Game of Thrones
over there.
No, it's more like it's way more like the plot to it's way more like the plot to like Escape from New York or Escape from LA.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like I'm imagining TJ building the wall and like don't.
But no, yeah, I have zero tolerance for it. No, they're gone.
Lawless land.
Lawless land.
Literal escape from New York, dude.
Yep.
TJ would literally just make Manhattan Island a max.
I don't know if I'd use Manhattan. I don't want to waste Manhattan on that. I'd put them in Wyoming or something.
Don't waste there. Yeah.
Just take the entire state of Wyoming and put a big energy dome over it and just throw all the criminals in there.
Well, not criminals. No, I didn't say I put the criminals there. I said I put the people who are violent or represented violent
political dissidents, people that didn't agree with you.
Right. Well, not just to disagree, but people who people who fucking promote violence. I fucking said I don't know why you keep trying to move the standard over to something else.
The standard itself is nebulous.
No, it's not. It's based on interpretation. The standard is extraordinarily fucking fine. Like it's defined very rigidly. Don't do harm to other people. It's very simple. It's not. I mean, like, sure, there's some areas where it's like if there's a fuzzy area, then that person's not going to be removed from society. I'm talking about someone who's like, we are the People's Resistance Army, and we are going to overthrow the government. And you're like, no, they got to go. They got to go. They're not allowed.
Have you not hurt others yourself, though? Have you not assaulted?
Well, let me ask you this, Scotty. What are you going to do with those people? What are you going to do with the people who are like, fuck Scotty's tyranny, we will overthrow him? You know, like, what are you gonna do with those people?
Well, it's a fair question and a fair time to kick the question over to Scotty.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll be right back. I got pissed. So,
all right, fair enough.
I want to answer TJ's, but I'll wait for him to get back for that.
Yeah. We'll definitely just vamp a little bit.
Fucking TJ, dude.
He's getting salty,
dude. I knew he was going to.
He's getting salty because there's some contradictory ideas happening here. I mean, the first 15 minutes were all about freedom and, the whole of the laws, do what thou wilt. And now we're sitting here talking about literally rounding people up and putting them on a fucking prison island.
I know, dude. It's great. Well, I think that's the big contradiction in TJ's ideas is that, and it's a noble cause. I will say that. I mean, to his credit, TJ really just wants to see a world where people are able to do what they want to do. But in order to make that world, unfortunately, with his system, is you're going to have to use a lot of violence. Right. And I'm not saying that violence is something that can be totally eradicated. Look, people are going to take violent actions.
Sure.
But at the same time, I don't think TJ really. I agree with you. I don't think he had much of a rehabilitation program. It didn't sound like he was really interested in trying to get people on his side. It was just like, well, you're going to be on my side because you're going to get whatever you want. But some people naturally gravitate towards authority. They want answers given to them. So in a society like that, those people are not going to thrive. And those are actually the conformist types are actually going to be oddly enough become the non-conformists because they're going to want a rigid system.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's always problems. I mean, no system is perfect, and I'll grant him that, but unfortunately for TJ...
Unfortunately for TJ, his society is 10 times better than mine.
But I do like your escape from
Paul's. Everyone can fucking see in the audience Paul just putting his thumb on those scales, like, what? You're saying
you're feeling persecuted now?
Hey, you have the people's vote too. The people can vote.
Oh, and the people will know who to vote for, so don't worry about that.
Oh yeah, start sucking the
fence
now.
Fence.
I mean, I'm not sucking anyone's dick. They hear my society and they're like, God damn, that's the society I want to live in. So
they'll get tired. What's that? The Chichika fan symbol.
Tajika fan. All right.
Hey, if you got them, use them.
It's Scotty's turn, right? It's Scotty's turn to fucking say some shit. Scotty, you talk.
All right, Scotty. Question number 1 for you. I guess we'll throw it to you. What system of morality would you foster, and how would you enforce it?
Obviously, morality is subjective, but as a whole, I would teach people basically something along the lines of secular humanism. We value everyone based on who they are. We don't look at that. We try to eliminate as much as possible biases like, okay, your race is this, or your gender is this, or these are the things that, we try to remove that from the equation. I mean, obviously, it's not entirely possible to do that, but that's something I think that we try to keep in mind as much as possible. To let everyone just live as people, as much as humanly possible. I know, obviously, there's going to be flaws in that. There's going to be people who are still going to be like, "That's a woman; she can't." But that's why we try to empathize and eradicate that way of thinking as much as possible. Because look, we're talking about ideas. We're talking about the fundamental program of people. And if you don't do that on that basic level, then you're not going to have a great society. And I think right now in society, it's too much like it's easy answers. It's like you're a woman or you're this race, so you're like this, you're like that. like I said before, you want to. This is a society that you would, if you were to create it, you would want to, but you would not know what you are going into it, and you would be equally happy with however your outcome was. And that's how I would want it to be, as much as possible, and to base that on just what's going to lead to a positive outcome for people in their lives, and try as much as possible to do things that are of a positive impact on the environment, on yourself, on your mental health, and try to base our morality on things like that, things we can tangibly measure as much as possible, and try to be as accurate as possible with what people want from their lives. And I think that's mostly to live in peace and to be able to pursue the things they care about. And if you intrude upon that for somebody else, that's when society or morality, I think, would be a more of a negative value judgment against you. Is like, look, you're trying to stop people from living in a peaceful and a way that is conducive to as structurally sound of a society as possible. And I think that's based on goodwill and empathy for most people.
Out of fairness,
sure.
the same kind of clarifying question to you. What happens when a group or multiple groups of people decide you're not doing things right? They have a different moral code. Some of the things you're doing are abominations.
Yep.
And in various ways, they're going to try and undermine what you've done, whether it's through simple protest or violent action or the threat of violent action. How would dissidents be handled, and people that threatened the order?
I can lend you some Zyklon tea if you need.
No, I don't think we'll need that. I think that on an individual level, we counsel that person. We see depending on if it's a very minor sort of infraction, like they're doing lots of drugs, they're doing something self-destructive. We basically try to counsel that person, help them whatever way is fitting or appropriate for their issue.
So re-education camps.
Not a re-education camp. No, it wouldn't be like a camp. It could be potentially done in outpatient settings, or it could obviously someone to severe mental distress. Obviously, that'd be something that a person might have to go to a mental health care facility. But obviously, we'd have to have strict regulations on that as much as possible to prevent abuses from people, and people and as much transparency as possible. But that'd be an individual level. Like I said, like if let's say you're smoking too much, you're doing something like that. That's just like, hey, let's just talk about this issue.
Damn, Scotty.
Wait a minute. Maybe decide on freedom.
Wait a minute.
In that case.
Wait a minute.
What's that? Okay.
So wait, I'm the one who has a draconian society, but Scotty's sitting here like, man, if you smoke too much, you got to go to a re-education center. If you go to too many drugs. Oh yeah, well it's basically a re-education center. Like you don't fit with the paradigm of society because you smoke or you do this or whatever.
No, that doesn't necessarily mean that.
It seems like your society does not place a very high value on personal freedom, which mine does. Just
it does.
Saying.
And it's still trying to be understanding of the choices people make, not necessarily try to force them, but also make them see.
If you're running society, if you don't like, wait, hold on,
the consequence of their actions.
Okay, so if you don't like,
and force them to confront what they're actually doing, and not necessarily to tell them like this is the right way of doing things. Now, obviously, people doing those are minor things we're talking about, like smoking, drinking too much.
Well, hold on, I have a question about the smoking thing. So, like, if people are smoking and you're gonna put all this money into like, let's re-educate them or whatever, or I don't know, maybe you don't have money in your society.
Well, to be more healthful, overall.
But you're going to put resources, the resources are going to be allocated to teaching them not to smoke or whatever. Why not just outlaw smoking? Because you're already living in a draconian society anyway. So you might as well just fucking outlaw cigarettes, right?
No,
okay,
not necessarily. It'd be about informed consent and understanding what you're doing, the consequence of your actions, and making the best decision possible based on that. I don't think you can necessarily prevent every negative behavior from happening. I don't think you should try to. I think you should embrace that some negative behaviors are going to happen and counsel those people against that and try to find the underlying cause of why they are smoking. Is it simply they just enjoy it? Maybe that person just enjoys smoking. There's really no negative mental health reason why. It's just the physical health, and it's a physical decision based on them, and they should have the autonomy to make that decision.
Okay.
All right. Well, those are two questions apiece on culture. We're moving on to the second of the three C's, cooperation.
Cooperation.
You might think that cooperation might have been ground that we've treaded already, but there's a stark difference between interdependence and cooperation. Interdependence means that we rely on one another to help, to take care of everyone at once. Cooperation means that we make the active action of working with one another in order to build something for the common good, or to create something for the common good, or to solve a problem for the common good.
Right.
So cooperation is another essential element that constitutes a society. Without cooperation, no society can exist. If the members of the society do not work together for the common purpose, they cannot lead a happy and a comfortable life. Cooperation avoids mutual destructiveness and results in an economy. In the words of P. Grisbert, cooperation is the most elementary process of social life, without which society is impossible.
Sure.
For want of cooperation, the entire fabric of society would collapse. It's the very basis of social life. Cooperation arises when men realize they have common interests. So great is the realization and the necessity of cooperation on the part of every society that Kropotkin once said it's difficult for any society to survive without it. So, Scotty, you will be going first this time. TJ went first last time.
Okay. Sure.
So what forms of cooperation would be most essential in your society?
I think a major thing lacking in our society currently is investment in what's called, and this used to be like nobility of a lot of societies. It'd be the public square. Number one is the infrastructure and the environments we live in. Make people have an invested stake on a local level, like the trees, the fucking ponds, all those little things that make up our ecosystem, teaching people the importance of those to the environment and making them feel like they have an invested stake in where they live, because they do. The air they breathe, the water they drink, these are all fundamental things to life. And that's a thing I think we first most taught to people from a very young age. Like, everything around you, you're dependent on is dependent on you. You have to cooperate first with your environment and not take too much from it and not plunder it, or these resources, which are finite, are going to be gone. Number two, as far as look, we give humanity big goals. We give people big challenges. And obviously, I've already talked about the fact that, look, there's not going to be a fiat currency. No, obviously, there's going to come issues with that. But as much as possible for people to cooperate, it's going to be even more essential in a society like that, because we're not going to be talking about getting more money. We're going to talk about getting more things done, more achievements. Like, hey, instead of, China working on a space program, the U.S. working on a space program, and Russia, it's like our combined efforts are going to do way more. And it's big ideas like that from businesses. Like, look, and that's one thing I took away from Cheetah's idea that I liked. A lot of more worker-owned cooperatives, people voting on their destiny, what they think is best, taking ethical and moral and other implications into account when they have a business model of what they're going to do. If they're going to make clothes or whatever, like, where are they going to be sourced from? What is the impact going to be? And then giving people a voice in that. Right now, people go to the jobs in their drones. It's you do this, you do that. Humanity needs more of a voice in its own future. And I would have, I think at some degree, like federal ballot initiatives, or I don't know how the society be organized, but we organize it in a way that people have more of a say in the affairs of the world. So people feel like they're actually giving consent to things, as opposed to just simply being told, well, this is how things are, as much as is feasibly possible. Obviously, people can't vote on or agree on every issue. They have to have some sort of representation. I think we all acknowledge that.
Well, let me ask you this:
the best informed person.
Now, I know that your society is based on empathy.
But the problem with that. Hold
on, I want to ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
To clarify, just on the same point.
Okay, sure.
So your society is based on empathy and stuff, but obviously, human beings have a
and science and reason,
right? But human beings do have a proclivity towards bigotry and stuff. So when you talk about a federal ballot initiative, would you ever in this society foresee putting like the rights of any particular group of people up for a vote by the majority, or do you think that would be fundamentally a terrible idea?
No.
Okay.
That would be a fundamentally terrible idea.
I just want to make sure on that one.
I would think that, like you said, a document like a constitution or something like that for every citizen of the planet, and you wouldn't be able to vote on things like that. I don't think that's really up for vote. I don't think that would have a place in our society. Now, obviously, there might be people that push those divisions, and I guess that's something you'd have to deal with. But yet again, I think a lot of those things and a lot of those people you find in today's society who are, vitriolic racist, there's usually an underlying cause for that.
Right.
Be that poverty, be that their socioeconomic status, be indoctrination by, people who are also racist, which is what it tends to be, or, a culture of racism.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously you're going to have that, but I mean, from a legal sense, no, there will be no sort of discrimination or intolerance allowed on that level. No. Okay.
Second question, Scotty, how would you enforce cooperation, if at all, in your society?
I would never force. I would encourage, and the way you would encourage is by creating a culture that values those things. If young people see their adults and see their mentors doing things, and this is how they're living. They're seeing, like I said, the success of that. They're going to naturally emulate those things. You know, when you look at children, they're very malleable in that sense, and they're going to do whatever they see around them. If it's violence, they're going to learn to do violence. If it's to be empathetic and to consider these things and their actions and the implications and what ultimately happens and is derived from those decisions, and to see people working together in cooperation, that is what they're going to learn, and that's what you teach them. And so to me, that's the most important thing. You teach cooperation, you encourage cooperation. You can't force someone to cooperate. If you try to force someone, you've already lost because they're just not going to cooperate. That's the opposite.
What about situations where there's like a disaster or something? Like, let's say there's like a 9/11 in your society or a massive
that brings
hurricane
people. Honestly, like, even a society like this, that brings people together.
Right, but like if there might be I'm just saying there might be instances where you do have to, for the good of like fixing the problem, enforce some kind of cooperation, right?
Well, I think naturally people have a tendency, if you look at human nature, to help to begin with. Most people do.
Right.
And I think that when you see a disaster like that, like a hurricane or something, we'd be doing everything to evacuate, if it was a hurricane, just for example, people away from that area. Let's say it's an earthquake, so there's no way you can really plan for it. Well, one, you have as restrictive building codes as possible, because it'd be as scientific as possible about that. Maybe not building in certain areas that could be more susceptible, even though that would cause short-term pain. In the long term, if we know there's a natural disaster, an area is prone to that, we try to save people's lives by preventing the people from even living in those spots. Like during Hurricane Katrina, a big issue is people lived in very low-lying areas. Maybe
ultimately a limitation of freedom to protect people from, dangerous instances.
But I think one that people recognize is rational. It wouldn't be irrational, like, hey, this is, if people know that, hey, this could happen, obviously there's an acceptable level of risk. If you can build buildings where, like, let's say in LA, where they'll survive, most, like 99% of earthquakes or whatever, then, hey, fine. A little risk is, I think, acceptable. If you're talking about something where people are assuredly going to die or get hurt, an active volcano, I want to live, I don't know if necessarily that should be allowed. You should allow that. Now, I guess maybe you can run into the argument of, should they have the ability to do something that is bad for them? And I think to some degree, yes, but on a societal level, no. An individual level, I can see that working.
What if they're like, okay, we've determined that this low-lying land is at extreme risk of flooding in the case of a hurricane, and this is a hurricane-prone area or whatever. Sure. And what if all the people of that live there band together and say, like, no, my granddaddy lived here and his granddaddy and blah, 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 blah. And they make this big emotional argument. And they're like, we will refuse to leave. We're going to live here. What do you do then?
People
if they absolutely refuse to fucking see
absolutely
reason.
Refuse to leave.
Yeah, they're just like, we're not leaving. This is our home.
I would think we would try to understand the root cause of that as much as possible and try to convince as many people as possible that their actions were going to put them in mortal danger, and that at a certain point, if those areas flood, there's not going to be any help available to them. And I would say the only draconian measure the government would do, obviously, would try to help those people as much as possible if a natural disaster did occur. But after that, let's say the area was destroyed and they stay, and as many people stayed there as they wanted to, I wouldn't force them at a gunpoint. But after that, the government would obviously then encourage people to rebuild in other areas and would not allow rebuilding of those areas.
So how would you stop the rebuilding there? You just like put soldiers
you would not allow building permits. You would not allow anyone to construct anything. If people try to construct, you say, no, you can't. Like, look, these houses can exist here, but in the future, we're not allowed any new houses to be built there. And after a generation or two, people would have moved off anyways.
So you don't think you would ever need to use force in that situation at all?
I mean, unless it turned violent. If they just wanted to stay there yeah, I wouldn't force them. I wouldn't kill them. I don't think that's worth killing them if they want to commit
I'm not about killing them, but like even
at a certain point.
Not even the threat.
If they're already there, I don't feel it's right to force someone off their land.
Okay, I'm just curious. So what about things like, so this kind of gets into issues of like eminent domain and stuff. So like there's obviously instances where the government is like, hey, we're going to build a road through here. We need to build this infrastructure in this place, and they tell people like, get off this land. We're building something here. And, like that might seem draconian and like horrible if you're that person. But like in terms of the like overall function of society, like it's kind of necessary, right? So like how would you deal with eminent domain issues if you're not going to use even the threat of force to remove people from their land?
Well, that's a fair point. I would say this. I would say society would have to weigh those options out. Mm-hmm. Because there's not always an easy decision. It's not always good decision, bad decision. Now, if something's vital to infrastructure, if it's vital to keeping most people healthy or safe, and it means one person might lose a house or property, that might very well happen. They have to be as compensated as fairly as possible, give as many accommodations as possible. Like, let's say, like they might even come out ahead of it in a sense. Like you had a smaller house here. You get a brand new house here.
Yeah. But ultimately what I'm saying is
possible.
Ultimately what I'm saying is that, like, at the end of the day, you do have to use, at least for some people, the threat of force, right? To remove them.
I would go through a legal process as much as possible. Not actually. I mean, let's say I will not leave the land. Then I guess at some point, yeah, you might have to if it was necessary. If the benefit of that for society was so much greater than that person having that land, then yes. Sure. I mean, I think at that point you might have to use force. But I said as a last resort, and it's not something that I think would be taken lightly. It would be something that the government worked and did pains and everything possible, like. Let's talk this issue out. Let's mediate. Let's do everything we can. No, I refuse. You come here, you're going to get me off this land and needed vitally for whatever reason. But if there's no vital need for it, if it's for a shopping mall, then no.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about for a shopping mall. I'm talking for, like, you need to build a high-speed rail or something, but it goes through some fucking dude's ranch or whatever, you know. Talk about something.
I mean, that would try to be avoided as much as possible. But if it was necessary, I guess ultimately, yeah, there would be some, maybe if all else failed, that's probably what would end up happening.
Gotcha.
All right. So TJ, on the issue of cooperation, and this is interesting. I kind of want to hear what you both have to think about this one. So Scotty, we'll have you chime in as well on this. But
I'm not getting the same question he got.
No. Okay. This is a different question. Gotcha. How would a person make a living in your society, or would that even be a concern?
It'd be something of a concern. I mean, like I said, I think that the basic necessities that a human being needs to live a reasonably comfortable existence should be furnished to them. So, there's no need to make a living, quote unquote. But I think that, people crave luxury. And, I'm not saying that the people who are at the bottom of my society are necessarily going to lack any sort of like luxury goods or whatever. They're going to still have material pleasures, but obviously there's going to be certain people who want a greater allocation of resources directed their way, and they're going to fucking work for it. So I think that, as far as that goes, that could be anything from I am going to work for this. I'm going to go bake bread, at this big factory that makes bread for the stores, and it's a worker-owned co-op, and we're all going to be. I mean, I think that I'm using the bread example because I know of an actual bread making worker-owned co-op, I think in San Francisco or something like that. But so I mean, like, I don't think that there's any necessity to make a living in my society, because I think that the bare minimum standard of living is high enough that people can survive in relative comfort and ease. But if you want to go beyond that, which I think most people will, there's going to be opportunities available to do the same kind of jobs that you see in this society, but with much more democracy and much more input in, what your job is. And you're not going to be necessarily funneling all of the capital towards some owner class or whatever. Now, obviously, if you're looking at something like a tech firm or something like that, let's say you're talking about, like, we're a software development company. It's a reasonably, like, a smallish one with maybe 50 to 100 workers or something. Obviously, the people who run the co-op, which would be everybody collectively, might all say, hey, Joe the janitor doesn't necessarily need to get as much as, Bill the top coder, but the janitor would still be an owner in that co-op, and obviously he could vote to give himself more wage. But, if the collective says that that's not, he's not worth it for sweeping the floor, which is something that basically anyone can do, then so there would still maybe be some discrepancies in pay even in that kind of system. But it would be at least decided collectively and with the voices of everyone involved.
I've heard you both talk a lot about worker-owned co-ops replacing traditional corporations.
I think
and
it's
businesses.
a good idea. Yeah.
But what about the redundancy and the waste that comes with having these many competing businesses? Having 10 different companies worldwide that all make functionally the same screwdriver, or you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think that's better than a monopoly on the screwdriver industry.
No, I agree, but in a world where scarcity is becoming more and more of the buzzword of the day,
right?
And do you really think that it would be wise in both of your societies to move forward with this kind of capitalistic competition idea? Where there's 18 different worker co-ops baking bread.
Well, I think that, look, I mean, if we're the reason that I tether some of this stuff to the market, and I think that ultimately, you could move away from a market economy, but I don't have in my head a solution where it's like, this is what a post-capitalist society looks like. So I think we move as close to that as we possibly can and then see where we can go from there. But, in terms of that, I mean, like the marketplace, I agree that it's not great at determining certain things. Like if we're talking about the for-profit prison industry that exists in our society, for instance, that's obviously, you don't want to create a profit incentive to lock people up. You don't want to create a profit incentive to not provide health care to somebody. But when it comes to like, simple material goods like bread or something, I think the market's pretty good at fucking facilitating that for people. If I think that, if there's too many bread companies, then, some of them are going to go out of business because
well, I mean, if that were the case,
that's going to be the natural,
now. I mean,
the natural order of things. Yeah. I mean, well, that does happen now though. I mean,
it does. But we looked at,
but people love this variety,
Somewhere between 40 and 50% of food that's produced is waste.
Oh yeah, sure.
I mean, that can't continue in perpetuity. I think we all economy with that. So how do your societies address that?
I think that you just
while still maintaining a robust capitalistic competitive economy.
Right. Well, like I said, in my society, of course, there's a giant class of people who are given like a bare minimum standard of stuff. So I think you could just kind of allocate those resources in their direction, right?
Well, to a certain extent, yeah, but I mean, what are they going to be using to buy it with? So you're going to give them disposable income?
No, I would say just provide them the food directly if they want it. Like have a government run Instacart or something that provides like a certain level of
but
stuff.
Who would make the food? What would be the profit imperative that would?
Well, the government would compensate the firms.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and the government just running the farms and distributing the food to the people?
The government's not very good at it. The marketplace is definitely better at producing those kind of resources because of the profit.
I mean,
incentive.
Is it wasting 40% of its food? I mean, maybe the government as it exists now.
Well, look,
is worse at it. But would your government be worse at it?
Yeah, I just think planned economies are not a good idea. They don't tend to work very well. I think we saw that in the Soviet Union and other historical examples. I think that you're better off using market forces and competition for that kind of stuff.
Dang. Anything to add on that, Scotty, in terms of how people would have to make a living, or would they have to make a living?
I wouldn't say make a living in that traditional way. Like I am compelled to go to this job to pay for the basic necessities. Now, number one, I'm not against having, let's say the issue of food. I would say we would study the best possible way to distribute food, because a big problem with talking about like all this food waste is that there's no one, like one, there could be no one there to pick the food. There could be no way to transport the food. So I think food has to be looked at from a fundamentally local level. What resources are available locally to people? And obviously encourage, in a number of sense, people growing a lot of their own food if possible. Now, obviously, that's not entirely possible for everything. Like, let's say meat products or, meat imitation products, like vegan, sort of like, the fake beef or whatever.
Right.
One, I would encourage a lot more of that. That'd be, in a sense, wouldn't be subsidized, but I would say, if it came to that, as much self-reliance as possible and as good for the environment as possible. And I think people having a lot of gardens and stuff on a local level. And another thing I would envision too is people, like a lot of times now, people live in very large houses that are very wasteful. So I would say what the most efficient housing models would be. And I would want housing that also incorporates things like that. Things like, we can have a community garden. We can have enough to sustain this number of people. We have people
it seems that like advanced in your society, would they be able to attain a mansion if they wanted to?
I mean, maybe it's possible. I wouldn't say it's impossible to achieve it, but I think for the most part that wouldn't be the overarching goal.
So
I think if people want to attain that, maybe they could find a way to make that happen. There might be existent mansions or something, and maybe they could, use their labor or what they've done to gain those things. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for them to get a mansion, but I don't think that from the system I would be designing, that would be the optimal way of using that land.
It seems like there is a great degree of civic duty and like personal responsibility tied up into your system to the point where it's like, okay, so people are strongly encouraged to grow their own food and stuff. Like that's a drain on time. People are forced to live in like particular kinds of houses with no really upward mobility kind of mechanism built into it. So I just think, I don't know. I feel like that system is going to create a lot of. Clearly some people
you're discounting a number of things.
Right. Well, hold on. Let me finish the question. Then you can tell me what I'm discounting.
Okay. Well, you're basically trying to force a narrative into them and say, oh, okay. Well, you have to. I'm trying
to force a narrative. No one tried to force any narratives on me. That's fucking unique.
You're trying to force a false narrative.
Well, no. I'm using your own words. You said people be encouraged to grow their own food. You said people have to live in fucking environmentally friendly housing.
Yeah, encouraged.
Right,
I'm not saying that'd be the only means of getting food. Of course not.
But and you said that it'd be very difficult for someone to attain like a mansion or something like that. So there's like your society does not prize mobility or upward mobility. It doesn't prize convenience, right? It's more about responsibility and civic duty and stuff like that. And I appreciate that, but I think that kind of stuff is going to create a certain degree of miserableness in a lot of people. So how would you address that?
It's already been addressed. If you actually listen to what I said.
Okay, well, go ahead and address it again because I obviously wasn't listening the first time.
People compete with ideas, TJ. People can compete with the things that they could do. It's not just how much money you make. It's not how big your bank account is. That's not the stick we use to measure civic accomplishment.
Right.
And I know you're saying, oh, well, that sounds terrible. You can't have a mansion. Well, what if someone wants a mansion? Well, does the needs of that one person wanting a mansion outweigh the health of our planet and environment? Is it practical for every person to have a mansion? No.
I'm not talking about everyone having a mansion.
No, but I'm just saying, giving your example.
Well, I mean, like, hold on. Well, forget about the mansion, but let's just address the idea of like convenience and stuff, because like obviously people in our society that exists now are used to the idea of convenience and just going to the store and getting food or ordering food. You're talking about a society where people are strongly encouraged to grow their own food, which is a drain on time and resources and all this other stuff. And I just want to know how that would work.
There still have to be food distribution, and I feel like the government and private individuals could provide that. I don't think that's impossible to say that there's not going to be someone that's going to be better at baking bread than you.
Right.
And obviously, you would want that.
So in a
bread.
post-capitalist society, how do you motivate the people to manufacture the food? Is it just like mandated by the government, like you're going to do this kind of thing, or?
Well, what I would encourage more than anything is the use of technology as a stopgap between those things. Right. So make it not necessarily somebody's job. Now, my ultimate thing is and obviously it goes outside the realm of plausibility, so I haven't mentioned it, is obviously a replicator. But what I would encourage or what I would want is technology to be geared in that direction.
Of automation.
Of automation. Automating these things as much as humanly possible.
Sure.
Do you agree with that in your society as well, TJ, or do you see a value in keeping kind of normal labor positions available to people?
I think that some people. I mean, look, I think automation is inevitable. I think that you have to have some automation, but like, let's be real. There's no we're not anywhere near the cusp right now of automating away every single fucking job that a human being does. So I'm thinking about my society in terms of taking the material of this society and, kind of extrapolating it. So like, obviously, yeah, we embrace automation. And I think that, I think that there is value to work, and I think there's value to people seeing the fruits of their own labor. So I think that, yeah, you do want to keep those systems intact to some extent. I don't think I don't have this fundamental belief that a lot of people seem to have, that people want to just sit around and be lazy all day and not do anything. I think people want things to occupy.
Look, there's plenty of people that live in
and I think
baskets, TJ, that under my system,
I think there's some people that want to do that, but I think there's people who want to fundamentally do something and then see the fruits of the something that they've done. I think that's a fundamental part of human nature.
But they're mistaking the money for the actions that they're doing, is what I'm saying to you. The money is something they need.
Right.
People that, if they have a farm and they raise cattle or whatever it is they're doing, are not doing that just simply because, this time I'm going to make money. Maybe some of them, sure. But people are doing this, they want to live a certain lifestyle. They want to do those things. So I'm not saying that you do away with those things. The money is
just representation of value. It's like, here's my cow that I raised, right? And it is worth something to someone else because they can eat it or they can get milk from it or whatever. So instead of using like the past system where it's like I'm going to trade my cow for their tractor or whatever the fuck, whatever a fair exchange would be, because that person doesn't always necessarily have the exact resource that you want. So money makes sense as a here, I will give you this and then you can use it to obtain what you need, instead of doing a direct trade, because then you have to find someone that has what you want and you have what they want, which is just fucking, it's a pain in the ass. So it makes sense to have some sort of currency as like, here, we all agree this has value, so let's do it this thing.
Well, it's interesting that we're going down this road, because it moves to our next point, the final of the 3 C's, conflict. So with cooperation, the mirror image of cooperation, of course, is conflict. And conflict, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is just as important to the formation and health of a society as cooperation.
Sure.
A free and harmonious society is practically an impossibility in my mind. There's no denying the fact that society requires for its formation and growth both harmony and disharmony, cooperation and conflict. Cooperation crossed by conflict marks society wherever it is revealed.
Sure.
So who went first last time?
Scotty, I think.
Scotty went first. So TJ, you are up on deck this time.
Gotcha.
What mechanisms would solve conflict in your society, and how would you ensure the fairness of that process?
So look, I think that society needs assholes. There have been studies have been done that show that the asshole is always the one who is resistant to the authoritarian, the despot. The asshole is the one who questions the Nazi when he says, electrocute this man or whatever.
Isn't the Nazi himself an asshole?
Yes, but when I'm talking about assholes, I'm talking about people who are socially obstinate and not necessarily willing to just instantly cave in to authority, because that's kind of
you're talking about rebellious people. So you and I have a different definition of asshole.
Yeah,
I guess.
Well, maybe a little bit, but but in social settings, like the person who's the most difficult to get along with people tends to be the one who stands up when things get fucked up. Tends to be the one who says this is bullshit. And so when I say asshole, I mean people who are like socially difficult and challenge others, which most people don't like. Most people want to fucking someone who's just nicey nice and fucking is always diplomatic. So when I'm talking about assholes, I'm talking about the people who are not diplomatic. And I think that there's a definite value in conflict, because I can sit here and wax philosophical all day about my perfect society and stuff, but there's still going to be realities on the ground of that society that are going to cause dissatisfaction, and they're going to need someone to fucking stand up and point out, hey, this thing about our society is fucking bullshit. And so I think the way that you deal with that is you try to facilitate those people to the greatest extent possible, which is why my society prizes ideological diversity so highly. I think you need that person to come forward.
Also, because so much of it's conflict as well.
Right. But I think, like I just said, conflict is super valuable. So I think that, you need to
always valuable.
Usually, I think you need that.
Really? So what about war-torn countries? Is Somalia is that conflict?
Well, that's why there's the non-violence clause that I've gone into like 1,000 times. But I think that
you really haven't addressed that. You really just skirted around it. You go, how
have I skirted around it? You guys have described my measures as completely draconian. Conflict is of course useful, and if you want to say it's not, then you can explain how in your answer. But
it can't be useful. Okay, and so now no one made a blanket statement about conflict, but I'm saying simply that. Conflict has benefits, don't you think your society ultimately is going to have a ton of conflict as you've pushed maximum diversity of ideas?
Absolutely, and that conflict is super valuable to my society.
Doesn't it disrupt social harmony?
Yeah.
Okay, my society doesn't have a very discordant society then.
Right, absolutely. So the conflict is super valuable. Everybody who wants a megaphone, I think, should be able to get one. And I think that, the way you address the problems of, how are you supposed to address the problems of society if people don't feel empowered to come forth with them, and to speak about them and to argue about them and to have long, maybe heated discussions about them? I think that you have to have this in place. Otherwise, there's no way for any problems to get addressed. If you just want to stifle anyone who's rocking the boat to any extent, then you're going to have a society that's very stagnant. So I think that you have to, obviously, with taking very harsh measures countermeasures against any sort of violence. Allow people a fucking open marketplace of ideas to express themselves in.
But
to the greatest extent
keep
possible.
in mind the question: what mechanisms would solve conflict in your society?
I think the
mechanism would you ensure the
mechanism that would solve
the
mechanism that would solve conflict is the one that's always solved conflict, and that's discussion. That's discussion. That's conversation. That's robust debate.
It's violence. Ultimately, violence.
It's not violence. No, violence is not typically solved conflict.
World War I and II, wasn't that ultimately the way it was resolved? Was through armed warfare, physical conflict?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about war. I don't think this is a war question. This is about conflicts within a society.
This is about
right?
conflict in all its many and varied forms.
Okay. So if we're talking about
conflict,
so if we're talking about
citizens,
if we're talking about war,
then
governments. If we're talking about war, then
governments that come in conflict.
I don't think. I don't think that this is.
Well, you haven't really described. Do you have a one world government? Do you have city states? Do you have sectors? Do you have regions?
Yeah, I think there'd be some sort of regional breakdown to the society. But as far as war goes, I mean, I think that we should. If I was to run a society, then. Or even if I was just to design a society, then war would be used only in a defensive capacity. So if we're talking about conflicts that arise within the society, I think they should be robustly discussed and debated.
But ultimately, how is that discussion decided?
I mean, I think that you just when the majority of people decide, hey, well, this is you got to change hearts and minds. That's the only way you can do it.
Well, but I mean, not every heart and mind will be changed. What do you do with the disgruntled that grow?
I mean, they're fucking gonna have to deal with it.
Have to go to Wyoming.
I don't know.
Deal with it. Well, see,
I can't.
What happens
well, hold on.
when
I don't
like
think
that just deal with it in societies that aren't.
Yeah, I don't think that you can have a society where there's going to be 100% approval of everything going on in the society.
Well, there's got to be. What I'm asking you is, there's got to be a mechanism in place to mitigate. Mm-hmm. These disagreements and problems that arise between people and these co-ops and government agencies.
Sure,
and the legal system as it stands right now, in my estimation, while the foundation of it I think is good, is a complete and utter joke.
Right,
and I'm wondering how would it differ? What would the mechanism be like for people to redress grievances? Let's say a conversation.
Okay, so if we're talking about, okay, so we're at a point where there's a conflict in society where, like maybe are we talking about like maybe an interpersonal dispute between neighbors or something?
Conversation hasn't worked, and two entities cannot.
They're not able to discuss it. Okay, so I think that at that point, you could have some form of mediation take place. Before you bother going into, like, we have mediation in this society, but it's prohibitively expensive. I think you could offer mediation as a service for a low rate, or for maybe for free, as a service. And I think that's extremely valuable because there's an intermediary in the conversation. And what the intermediary in a mediated agreement does, the mediator, is he talks to both parties, and he basically tells you what kind of how. It's basically like it's like a way to avoid getting into a lawsuit, because in a lawsuit, you're going to have this big, long, protracted legal battle. So the mediator's job is to kind of talk to both parties and advise them as to, like, here, if you did take this to the lawsuit level, here's how your case would probably go. They're an expert in the thing. So they can kind of like let someone know, hey, you do not have a very strong case. If you were to actually take this to the courts, you're probably going to lose. So this is a way.
Job, as I understand it, is to get both parties to make concessions to the point where the other party is satisfied.
They do that to some extent, but they're also kind of there to let people know how strong or weak their legal case is, so that they can draw those concessions out of them. So if that doesn't work, then obviously you proceed to the level of, you go to the courts and you deal with a lawsuit. Now, I don't know how fundamentally different a lawsuit would be in my society as it is in the current system. Obviously, you'd have to make adjustments, but I can't even begin to fathom what that would entail.
Do you have any ideas in a broad way of how you would ensure fairness where it doesn't seem to exist in the current judicial system?
If we're talking about, are we talking about just in like the matter of like
fair?
Like, are we talking about like across the spectrum of the courts?
Yeah,
like
fairness for
criminal
all
law and all this stuff,
and a decent track record for finding justice and mediating a solution to problems. At the end of the day.
That's almost a tougher question than anything else that's been asked here.
I agree,
because like I feel like the fundamentals of our justice system are set up in a way that they should be pretty effective and good, but the reality is just something entirely different. So I don't know. I think that you have to Well, I mean, some of the things we could fix. I'm gonna maybe just kind of like approach this from a like making adjustments to the current system that we have. So I think that when you say that everyone's entitled to legal representation, I think that you have to actually fund public defenders, and you can't overwork them. There has to be some sort of actual mechanism for people to have a robust legal defense, and not just someone who has 8 other cases that's going to tell them to plead guilty because I think we need to end the cash bail system, so there wouldn't be any of that in my society. I just think the process needs to be as streamlined as possible. People need to be, you don't need to be gaffled up. I think you need to remove any fucking semblance of a profit motive from the entire system. And I think if possible, maybe judges should be replaced with some sort of like community tribunal sort of thing. I don't know. It's a really tough one because, I mean, I feel like, once again, the fundamentals of our justice system are set up in such a way that you would think it would have better outcomes, but the outcomes are shit.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, it's a tough question, and you had some ideas there that I took down, so that's fine. I guess I'll ask you both this question. So when it comes to you, Scotty, you can start thinking about it now. How would you handle international conflict, both direct and indirect? Would such a thing exist in the world you envision, or do you intend to build a global society? That would be on to you, TJ.
Is that me? Okay.
Yeah, it's your second question.
I got you. I didn't realize. I thought you were asking Scotty. As far as international conflict goes, I think that working towards a global society is a good idea. I don't think that the human race is best served by a bunch of different nations, but obviously, we're not going to force people at the barrel of a gun to join our society. So, assuming that there's not a global society, then those kind of conflicts, I think, would be handled primarily with diplomacy. Try to make bargains. Try to, obviously, we want to maintain enough of a military force to be a deterrent. I don't think we want to have anything like the imperial force that America currently has. But I think that you have enough of a military to act as a deterrent. You have enough of a power, enough power and presence that no one's going to want to start a war with you or view you as an easy target. But at the same time, you don't want to, there's no regime change, war kind of stuff. I think you do have something like a CIA that's out there, no
regime change war. So, a President TJ would not have invaded
Iraq or
Normandy.
No, anywhere like no. I mean, probably not. Well, no. I mean, America was kind of just sucked into that conflict by Pearl Harbor, so I mean, like that's kind of a different thing. But
but ultimately, had America not intervened in that conflict, there's a good chance that the entire global paradigm would be different.
Yeah, possibly. But I think the Soviets probably would have stopped. I mean, the Soviets might have taken power though. So
without pushing them on both fronts, I don't know, dude.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, like we can't. I don't know if we can get into alternate history kind of stuff, but I think that regime change war it's led to too many negative results. I think obviously if you have someone who's doing like a global conquest and attacking allies and stuff like that, then maybe you can make a case for it. But things like Iraq wouldn't have happened. Things like Afghanistan would not have happened. Vietnam, Korea. Like so many of these wars that we've been engaged in, I don't think there was any strong necessity for the United States to get involved. But, we would still have a CIA. We'd still keep tabs on what's going on in these other countries. I think that you need to be mindful of any sort of threat that might be looming on the horizon. And I can see that there might be some instances where a preemptive strike might be necessary, but there'd still have to be very rigid criteria for it. And I think you should definitely try to use diplomacy. And I think that, any declaration of war would be a drain on your own country's resources. And, you don't want to cost innocent lives, then you're going to inevitably see casualties that are innocent people dying on both sides. And, I don't think you want to treat the lives of your soldiers as cheap. You definitely don't want to have anything like a military industrial complex arising. So I think that there needs to be almost 90% towards the pacifistic angle, but just enough of a fucking intimation of force that you can stand up for yourself and you're not going to be bullied on the international scene.
Okay. Scotty, same question. Let's just have you go right into it. If there's any difference between your position and TJ's, how would you handle international conflict, both direct and indirect? Would such a thing exist in the world you envision, or do you intend to build a global society?
A global society, because ultimately any divisions you create are going to be divisive points that are going to be later used in conflict. I mean, you could even say, let's divide the world into sectors. Sector 8 is better than Sector 9. We should invade them. They're lesser than us, or whatever. We've seen human nature, and until we get the idea that these lines in the sand don't mean anything out of people's heads, and we don't teach them, I think if CJ wants to make an argument that our side is authoritarian, the one I'm talking about, is that in the sense of the ideas that are taught to people. It's not necessarily to say that ideas are limited. Like, you never learn about warfare, so therefore you won't know about it. No, it's to understand the impacts of these actions and to understand that warfare leads to these outcomes and have a very broad view of that, and to go in and see these are the past conflicts that humanity is engaged in, and these are the outcomes. This many dead, these lives lost, these societies destroyed. We would try at every turn to educate people against that. If conflict somehow did arise within that system, then I guess you would have to, like TJ said, first you would have diplomacy. You'd have every measure possible. The only I would say time that conflict would be allowed or be condoned is if people understood that was the only measure necessary, and it was in self-defense. It was like there's no other choice. This one group of society has decided to kill other people. We've tried to talk to them. We've tried to do everything within our power to make them understand that these actions are wrong. They refuse to understand. And that's the only time I think conflict would be appropriate is to defend yourself. Because I think everyone has a right of self-defense. I don't think that any conflict should be brought out by petty divisions. And I think that's why it's critical to have your worldview right, Scotty fascist, and to try to avoid conflict at every turn. And I mean, look, if people understand fundamentally the actions of conflict and what it ultimately leads to, which is a less cohesive society, which is a society that does not value empathy and goodwill, does not create a better world, ultimately it destroys. It's a destructive process. And my thing, because ideas are the most important thing to people, whether you agree or not, what is in people's brains makes up a lot of what they do. And I think that's the most critical component you have to change. Because I think people right now view conflict as a necessary thing to get what they want. Like, well, fuck them. They don't want to listen to me. We'll bomb them into the Stone Age. Kill them all.
You're talking about global society. So what about you're talking about, there's going to be a lot of nations who are not going to want to join a global society. Like, you can have an ambition towards a global society, but how do you actually facilitate that? Because, if you're going to, are you going to do it at the end
by being superior in all other metrics?
Do it at the edge of a gun? Or they're just going to make, you're just going to make it, you're just going to have such an awesome society that everyone's going to want to join?
That'd be the goal. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
You just try to no, look, I mean, obviously we're not talking about a perfect world. I mean, I think that's a fair point. Okay, let's say some countries, that's terrible. Just make them the societies that everyone looks at and like, oh, those poor people, wish they would live under this system, and they see how the other people are living. Because look, the proof is in the pudding, TJ. No one's just gonna fucking on paper go, it's better. Right. You can debate that all day long. You have to show people and you have to prove to people they can have a better life. And if they have the better life, then people are gonna clamor for that. They're gonna clamor for what's better. Let's say TJ, let's say you have been born in a time period before air conditioning.
Yeah.
And then air conditioning was invented.
Right.
And you're like, wow, this feels great. But other people, for some reason, said, I eschew technology. I don't want air conditioning. I don't want that luxury. I don't need it.
Yeah.
But you had known, and I mean, you'd probably at that point want air conditioning, right? You'd say, man, this is better than not having it.
Oh yeah.
Same sort of kind of.
Sure.
So the logic is the same thing. If they see one people living lives of desperation and exploitation, and everyone around them is living a different life. Now, maybe that's from political oppression or something else.
Don't you think the entrenched power structures in that country are going to be like, oh no, if our citizens want to join this country, we're going to lose power, so they're going to like propagandize against you and be like, it's fascism and this and that and the other.
They probably would, but there's a lot of ways to help those people, and I would try every way possible to undermine those societies.
There's also the question of, and I know this sounds a little bit dictatorial, but there's the question of, conquering these countries, quote unquote, conquering them and forcing them to be part of the collective. The bloodshed involved in that is probably way less than allowing the stratification of these countries on the long term It's one big kind of military push. And then once, and then a few generations of assimilation, and then you have your truly global society. No holdouts, no rogue nations. So, I don't know. I don't know what the most humane answer is. Some kind of like, hey, let's just get this done. Let's go conquer the fucking world so that finally we're under one banner, or slowly but surely try and cajole these countries and incentivize these countries into joining us over the course of who knows how many generations.
Well, the thing is that the more people and the more minds and ideas and nations are absorbed by a global society, the more powerful it's ultimately going to become, and the less of a competitor you're going to be. Because like, if you're trying to trade with us and you're trying to we'll give you money, like, no, we want ideas from you. We want these things from you. They will change because that's how they're going to survive in the global order.
All right, fair enough. Second question for you, Scotty. What level of intervention would you support in solving domestic conflict? How would police be constrained, if at all? And how would military, if one should exist in your world, be used?
Well, I think both those things would exist. I think there's a fundamental need, especially more for police. But number one is it'd be a very difficult position to obtain. Like, you have to be stringently psychologically screened. You would have, you talk about, I'll tell you one thing, like, while a cop was working, every metric possible about them would be tracked. Everything about them, like as far as where they went, who they interacted with, the way they handled different conflicts would be paramount and be studied. And if someone is ever found to abuse their power, that would be immediate removal. And there obviously would be independent oversight of all police organizations, of any sort of thing. There would have to be independent oversight that had nothing to do with those organizations. There would have to be checks and balances on power. And police
Is
would not...
it possible for you to shut the fuck up for 10?
Sorry. Just meddling with his insult soundboard. Go ahead. Whoa.
Now in a large capacity, I don't know necessarily if police should even be armed in my society. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. I think that I'm not saying that no police would ever have access to firearms or weapons, but I think that would I don't think that'd be the first line of police you would encounter. And I think they would take on more of a role of community mediator and resolving conflicts through discussion and things like that. And obviously, if that escalated, someone might have to get into the criminal justice system.
Do you agree with that, before he moves on, by the way, disarming the police except for an extreme need?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Interesting.
I think it's fundamentally the job of the police to de-escalate situations, and I think them being armed only escalates things. Obviously,
I agree.
Obviously, there have to be some instances where the police will come armed, but that should be a very specific and,
Yeah, there's a credible, specific threat.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Good thoughts on that. Let's take a break from the dreary political serious shit, and let's do a segment I like to call entertainment. I want each of you to describe the most crazy, amazing form of entertainment that would enthrall the masses of your society that you would, of course, facilitate and make legal. Starting with TJ, what's the craziest shit that would be on the boob tube if I sat down in T-Jonia tonight?
Within any sort of like limitations.
I'll be right back.
No, I don't want to hear everything you could ever want, man. I want you to pitch me a fucking crazy game show or a crazy reality show or a crazy recurring news program.
Sure.
That doesn't exist now. That's just going to be fucking badass and make your society way more appealing.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me think. You definitely see more like nudity and stuff on
tits
television.
Are good.
I don't know that there'd be anything like too crazy because like my society has a strict prohibition on violence, so I don't think you wouldn't turn on and see like, oh, it's the serial killer show where we track aspiring serial killers and see who could get the most creative kill or something. Like I think for that level of crazy entertainment, you're going to need to go to a society that's way more dystopian and dysfunctional. Because I think a dystopian society like that's going to have better TV than what my society can muster.
Sure.
But as far as that goes, you're going to see much much more tits and ass and shit on TV because there's going to be way more of a libertine sort of mentality to the culture, I'm sure. You're probably going to, I mean, like, honestly, a lot of the TV in my reality would probably be pretty boring because my society is going to place a strong emphasis on, debates and stuff like that. So you're probably going to see a lot of fucking like, debate and discussion based shows like what we do here.
So I mean, when I'm wanting to chill and I turn on the TV, I'm going to see Sargon of Akkad versus fucking Jordan Peterson and shit.
Shit like that. So, I mean, like, I think entertainment in my world is going to be kind of dull in that regard. I mean, there'll still be movies and shit like that, but I don't really see them being all that fundamentally different. One thing that would be different is you'd see some high budget porn. Like there'd be like
high art porn.
Yeah, there'd be like pornography with like, $300 million budget or something, like if you're watching a movie, there'd be like a cool action scene and then afterwards you'd literally see the hero get his dick sucked or like fuck a bitch in the ass or something. So that would be kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be pretty neat.
So you'd see stuff like that. And like if you're going to do a high budget porn, you can do all kinds of crazy shit. Like you have like tentacle monsters and shit, whatever the fuck you want in that regard. So I think that might be a cool aspect of my society because
we already live in a society where pretty much any kind of porn.
Yeah, but not you don't see no $300 million budget porn though. So that's kind of the thing I'm saying. So I mean, like I think people are already uncomfortable. Like, oh, when a sex scene happens in a movie, I'm uncomfortable. That barrier would be totally broken down. You'd see a fucking hardcore sex and like, let's go see Godzilla. I heard there's a cool gangbang scene in the middle. Like,
what the hell, dude?
Right. So I mean, like that'd be something that would go on, I guess. So that'd be about the best I can do. But for the most part, like if you turn on the TV, you're going to see a bunch of boring dudes discussing shit. But what you would see that you don't see in our society is you'd see a way more robust array of ideas presented. It wouldn't just be one narrow sort of like, here's the Republican talking point and here's the Democrat talking. There'd be like all kinds of different ideas floating around.
All kinds of constant political
but it would be
talking heads droning back and forth and arguing with each other.
See, to me, that's a paradise. But I can understand how some people might not like that. So that might be a down.
Today
that might
on
be
Twitter War, hosted by TJ, Emperor of the Universe.
That might be a down vote for my society, but I don't care. That's basically what it would be on.
Hey, at least you were honest, TJ. At least
Flame wars abound.
Scotty, same question to you. What's the craziest kind of entertainment that I could expect to kind of enthrall the population? What would you make to rip people away from fucking America's Got Talent
tending their damn fucking vegetable gardens that everyone has to have under fucking dictator Scotty.
Dude, TJ, you would like your fucking fresh vine ripe tomatoes.
Yeah, but I wouldn't like fucking.
You love them.
Yeah.
They're not even difficult to grow, you lazy son of a bitch, TJ.
Yeah.
Anyways,
your society is anti-lazy people.
Number one, the arts would be heavily invested on a public scale, and I mean in the sense that whatever was needed to make those things happen, I think that'd be a large part of society because I think that's something that people value a lot. And I think that like I agree with a point I do agree with you, John, is the diversity of that, of the ability to take someone has an off-the-wall idea for a movie. Like you guys have had some great ideas for movies. Like I like to empower the average person for that to be a feasible path for them to be able to go through a process of maybe working with people that had an understanding of that and making those things reality as much as possible. So I would like to see a proliferation of film, of music, of literature, and a focus on that for a number of people as a way of fulfillment, not only for the audience for that, but the people creating it. Like, and so many people have these great ideas for books or movies or other forms of entertainment, and they're stifled. That number one would lead, in my opinion, to kind of like a renaissance of that, because so many ideas are held by the same people, the same reins of power, the same constraints about how much money they're going to make, big spectacle. Now, I'm not saying those would go away, but I'm saying that'd be my number one. That'd be my first move. My second move, and I would say this, is investing heavily in immersive technology. We're seeing it with VR. People are doing crazy things, just with this current technology we have now. Imagine if you could immerse yourself. Imagine if you could write the story of a movie or a game or whatever and put yourself in the center of that. And you could make it so, I never die in this thing. I'm invincible. You can make yourself, you could feel like you're in mortal danger. I would basically like, almost like an artificial intelligence program that could be designed by you. I mean, maybe at first you had to pre-program it, but eventually on the fly, like, okay, now I want some terrorists to attack me. Or now I want to be in a romantic comedy. I would almost like it if you weren't enjoying something like that, to be able to have that possible immersive experience. Like you're fighting zombies, you're defending a base, whatever. I think that's the ultimate thing that people really want, is to kind of be captured in that sense. Like, fuck suspension of disbelief. You are living that.
Right.
Awesome. All right. We, gentlemen, believe it or not, have finally reached the final category, and boy, is it a doozy.
A doozy.
I call this segment a final statement on leadership. Much importance is placed on the citizens of a society. In fact, we spent a lot of time talking about them tonight. But the burden of the health and sustainability of a society usually falls upon the shoulders of its leadership. Those in charge of distributing the resources, writing the laws, providing peace of mind and stability to the masses, set the tone of a society. So here I ask you both these questions. Now, I think TJ went first last time, so Scotty, you go first this time. If you, assuming you would be the ruler of your society, hypothetically,
sure,
what makes you a better choice than your brother TJ?
TJ, in so many respects, is prone to ego and vanity. And I think that I could set those things aside for the greater good. I think that TJ means well, and I think he hopes, I think TJ is designing a world that he would want to live in. I don't think he's trying to design the best possible world. I think he's trying to design his utopian world. And I think that mine is more in line with what I think is best for humanity. I think I would be, in a sense, like the caretaker of humanity, as he said before. I think TJ would be the one that would want to sit back and say, okay, I want to give people as much freedom, do what they want, kind of like, within limitations, of course. He set out a number of limitations. And I think he does have some mind towards equality. I don't think that he maybe goes far enough with some things, but I think his system, if you want to live like TJ, will work. I think for a number of people, TJ's system will fail. It won't take into account their feelings. It won't take into account the past and life they want to go forward with, and ultimately will collapse in on itself. I think my system always has infinite possibilities to expand in that, in the sense that we're always trying to understand what motivates people. To study our biology, to study our psychology, to study the human mind, and to try to understand the root causes of what in human nature causes these systems to fail, what causes these breakdowns, and to try to foster a society that is as good as possible for as many people as possible, with causing the least bit of a possible positive ecological, not damage, but growth. To make sure the flora and fauna and the water and everything is as clean as possible and is as beneficial for, we're good stewards of the planet. We're not just trashing this planet like we're doing now. I think that system creates that. I think TJ's system will ultimately lead to more degradation, because some people are going to want to engage in these things. And ultimately, he'll have to keep rolling back these freedoms for people with not much explanation. Not like, well, it's just for the good of all. But I think mine would address those issues more substantively, and I think in a way that people would be taught to value those things intrinsically as part of a core tenet of humanity.
All right, TJ, same question to you. Why would you be a better choice for ultimate leader of this new society than your brother Scotty?
Well, look, Scotty says that my society is based on what's good for me. His society is based on what's good for humanity. And I think that fundamentally belies what's wrong with Scotty's approach, because he feels like he's in a position to understand what's best for humanity. I think that humanity should be able to self-determine. That's why my society maximizes freedom, and that's why there are strict, and I admit it, authoritarian measures in there to preserve that freedom, because we know that laissez-faire freedom is really not a form of freedom. It just evolves into tribalism and sectarianism and violence, and that's why I have the bold strategy to deal with those fucking elements as they arise in a fucking harsh and unforgiving manner. And I don't think Scotty, frankly, has the stomach to deal with those things the way they need to be dealt with. He's not a strong leader. He wants to basically, every time he falls back on a tough issue, he's like, well, we'll study it. Just like any other fucking sort of politician. He's, how many times tonight did he say, we're going to study the issue. We're going to look into the issue. It's like, yeah, well, you can study it all you want, but at the end of the day, a decision has to be fucking made. And I'm the one who's willing to make those big, bold decisions while he sits around studying in his fucking thumbs and going, I wonder what we should do. Let's ask every expert in the universe, and then I'll think about it some more. And like, no, you need a bold leader with a bold vision, and that's me. It's not Scotty.
your decisions would be based on many times then on faulty information and irrational action, something you criticize constantly in the current administration, current president.
Well, that's why my society is a society of robust debate and personal freedom.
You're against pro study, and you active a study determines nothing. What drugs do you take? You study them.
Sure.
You could say, let's just.
Hey, I'm not against the very concept of a study. I'm against this political flim flam
decision to take this now.
Okay.
It's bold and decisive. Mm-hmm. Sure, I grant you that premise, but I don't grant you the outcome.
I think people want
the outcome.
People want strong leadership,
and you think ruling.
People want decisions.
You think ruling is about power.
Oh.
You're clearly what you value is the power. I have the power to make the decision. I make the bold decision. You're sitting around scribbling and looking at data and going, oh, well, you're never going to make a decision. No, we make a decision based on the best possible information.
Yeah.
Which is what our decision should be made.
I think that the decisions in my society are made by with the consent of the majority and after robust discussion from free people.
And there's nothing there would be nothing different in my society. It wouldn't be like we would say there's no freedom of speech. You can't have an opinion that's contrary.
Scotty's kind of a contradiction in terms because what he is a soft dictator. He wants to run his society like a dictator, but he's not strong enough to do it.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a benevolent dictator.
I didn't say a benevolent dictator. I said a soft dictator.
Oh, okay. I'm
a benevolent dictator, dude.
Hold on, I'm going to take that one down.
Yeah, TJ is, TJ is the iron fist and I'm the velvet glove.
Well, speaking of that, it's interesting that you should mention that because the final question of the night, and we'll start with you, Scotty, is how would you deal with a crisis of confidence in your leadership? Iron fist or velvet glove?
Didn't Scotty go first on the last one? Shouldn't it be my turn?
Well, I mean, we're just going back and forth.
You're the moderator. So. You go ahead.
Sure.
Look, they always say that honey attracts more fucking flies than vinegar, and it's in my experience in life, and it's just anecdotal and personal experience. Usually, going to conflict, be it an argument, be it physical, it can sometimes resolve problems because that outlet of anger or whatever was released. But I think if people really dealt with the issues they had with the other person, it probably never would have got to level. No, in most cases. So I feel it's important to always try to work with people, come to an understanding with people. Now, am I saying that's always possible? Of course, it's not always possible. But that's the goal we should strive for. Using force and violence should be a last resort. Now, TJ says that's weakness. But I think that's greater strength because it's easy just to go and send in jackboot thugs. We see it all the time. The police go and beat the shit out of somebody. As a protester, go break it up. Let's fuck their problems. They don't like the society. Fuck them. They should just do what they're fucking told. Why don't we try to understand those needs and try to meet those needs as much as we can? Because that's usually what people are mad about. When people are in the streets, they're not just there because I want to be in the street. Yeah, there's always people that are like that. I'll grant you that. A lot of those people are there because their fucking life sucks and they're not happy. If people were happy and their needs were being met, at least on a basic level, which I agree TJ's system strives to that too, that would occur. And I think that using force as the first and foremost point to that is already been tried and it doesn't work. So I reject that idea as much as humanly possible and move towards cooperation, understanding, empathy, and trying to make the world a better place. And obviously there's going to be speed bumps along that way. Obviously there's going to be people that are just going to want to use violence or do horrible things. But we can't let them set the tone. We have to set the tone for them.
I see. Same question to you, TJ. Crisis of confidence in your leadership. How do you deal with it? Iron fist or velvet glove?
Crisis of confidence in my leadership?
Yeah, you're talking about an uprising. You know what I mean?
So we're talking. So are we talking about like there's dissatisfaction with a decision I've made, or are we talking like there's people who want me to oust me from power?
We're talking about people are starting to talk about impeaching TJ or replacing TJ because he's just not he's not doing a good job.
If they want to, if there's a mechanism to peaceably impeach me, and the people feel that I'm no longer an adequate leader of the society, then I should be impeached.
Okay.
So
what if these people had an agenda that was to tear down everything that you had so carefully built? And
look, if my society is so bad that a majority of people are embracing an agenda totally to the contrary of what I've done, then clearly my society is a failure.
What if instead of just impeaching you, they want to form a military junta and storm your place of residence and carry your head out on a pike?
Iron fist, obviously. I'm going to destroy them at that point.
You're going to destroy them at that point.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
look, I mean, we've talked about, I believe that, there is a need in society for violence. I think there is a point when force becomes necessary. Obviously, cooperation is preferable, diplomacy is preferable, discussion is preferable. But if someone else takes it to the level of violence, you have to be ready to respond in kind. And I think that, any sort of system that I create would have the capacity to use violence against violence.
I mean, there are some philosophies that would say that violence should be met with defensiveness.
Well, that's not my philosophy.
Got it. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to call it there because we have both talked ourselves into a sewing circle here today.
Yeah.
Let me give you guys a brief overview of each of your positions.
Okay.
Starting with TJ.
Okay.
We're going to start with TJ. Now, according to TJ, when it comes to social relations, TJ is all about embracing diversity, rejecting forced commonality, a person having the freedom to pursue their own ends, respect for people's choices, with the limit, of course, of hurting others. He envisions a society based on freedom. He also talked about a changed family structure.
I didn't get it too deep into that one.
Sure. But I remember you saying that you believe that the family structure is due for some revision.
Yeah.
When it comes to social relation. You robustly embrace ideological diversity. You have a strong stigma in your society against violence. You are an advocate of minimum rules with an absolutely authoritarian maximum enforcement of the very few rules that there are.
Correct.
And you also said that you did make mention at one point of undesirables being removed from society.
Right. Undesirables being defined as people who propagate violence.
Well, or people who won't toe the line, people who won't follow the rules, right?
The main rule is no violence. So
okay, got it. You also talked briefly about mutual respect for other people's beliefs, tolerance despite disagreement or misunderstanding.
Right.
Scotty, on the other hand, he talked about a society more based on the golden rule, empathy, understanding man's plight, equity for all, rooting out racism, fostering empathy, getting people to believe that appearances don't matter, having a sense of open-mindedness, education, and within that education, indoctrination with good things in childhood instead of bad things.
Yes.
Differences should be taught to be differences are taught and superficial. Is what Scotty believes. He believes that a lot of the differences that people have ideologically or personally are often because of something that they were taught and are ultimately superficial, and that the system must try to adapt to people without empathy. And he also talked a little bit about forced psychological screening for awareness and treatment.
Yeah.
So an interesting look there. Now, when it comes to likeness and difference and the interplay between them, TJ, you said that you would like to foster a commonality based on humanist mentality, common genetic lineage, a focus on us as a species, the elimination of race and tribe, and having a general reverence for humanity as it exists, but not to the exclusion of the natural environment.
Right. I think we should view ourselves as stewards or wards of it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And you also said that as long as dissidents against TJ aren't doing harm, and I put that in quote because you never really, expounded much on what you would consider to be doing harm, that they would be listened to and allowed to exist.
Yes.
And Scotty, in your answers to these questions, you talked about a movement towards a more global society,
yes,
focusing people on profound common goals, e.g. the environment, and the breaking of old divisions and cultures, and offering people a better option to help them break ties with the past, or at least the things in the past that are holding us back.
Yes.
On the topic of interdependence, TJ, you said people would need each other for pleasure in your society, for companionship, for sex, and for learning and for conversation. You talked about reducing toil in the world to maximize people's recreation time.
Yes.
You also talked about keeping a capitalistic marketplace, but also ensuring a guaranteed standard of living.
I would say I would say just to clarify on that point, I would say that capitalistic enterprise. I advocate for a strongly mixed economy where the profit motive is used in certain areas and not others. So I would say very mixed economy. But yeah, some capitalist infrastructure still remains.
An important part of your ideology seemed to be that people who worked extra got more, which seems to me to be a pretty straight up capitalist.
Wait a minute. So I should probably clarify this because I don't think my system actually technically meets the definition of capitalism, because in capitalism, there is a capitalist. There's a person who puts forth capital in order to invest in like a business infrastructure. He has workers that work for him, and then what he pays them, he compensates them for their labor, but he undercompensates them so that he can keep the surplus. That wouldn't really exist under the system I'm talking about with worker-owned co-ops and stuff like that. The workers would own the profit generated by the company. So I don't think it strictly actually is capitalism,
but
it's
trade
still
in those commodities and
it's
stuff
still
it's
a market-based system. So there is elements of capitalism in it, but I don't think it actually meets the criteria of outright capitalism, since the workers do own the means of their own production.
But it may be like a quasi-capitalistic system.
Sure,
There's elements of capitalism
grant that.
present.
And I did finish your little section here by saying people desire hierarchy. You would outlaw private companies and replace them with worker-owned democratic co-ops.
I don't know if I'd outright outlaw them, but yeah,
sure,
basically.
Okay, Scotty, on the same question of interdependence, you said it's obvious that people need each other. I will say that at this point, Scotty was very stoned and struggling, but I did my best. I took my best notes. He said it's obvious people need each other. Lives based. He thought that people should live lives based on personal achievement. People spend their lives pursuing. He envisions that people should spend their lives pursuing their passions.
Yes.
He would encourage research into areas not filled by the pursuit of passion. So if there were anything that needed to be done that people weren't doing, then he would encourage research into those areas and find ways of solving those problems and filling those gaps. Humanity should be studied and understood. So Scotty takes kind of an alien race view to humanity. He feels like we really need to understand ourselves, and that everything that we do should be studied, and that data should be collated and kind of shaped into policy. So that's basically what I got there.
I'd say that's pretty accurate.
When it came to culture, TJ, you oppose the idea of an overarching culture, but you would support a thin humanist culture. You did talk about ostracizing dissidents from the culture, that being people not being allowed to engage in any part of the society.
Yes.
And you did talk about engaging in harsh measures for any mass social upheaval against that humanist culture. You even talked about, and I don't know if you were joking or not, but the land of the lawless, escape from Wyoming was brought up.
Yeah, I think it was semi-joking.
Okay, semi-joking.
No, look, I don't.
Yes or no?
I feel like there needs. Well, no, I feel like there needs to be some.
Not.
I think there should be some clarification here, because I mean, we keep coming back to this issue of the harmful elements of society. Like, look, we're talking about people who are doing violence to one another or advocating violence against one another. Or
what about stealing from one another?
I wouldn't ostracize them from society. I think that could be handled with fines and things of that nature.
Well, couldn't that lead to violence?
What if they just keep doing it? What if everywhere they go?
Well, I mean, if they're repeated offenders of that, then they're going to have to be.
Then they go to lawless land.
Well, I don't know if they're going to go to lawless land. They're probably just going to be incarcerated.
They go to Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, send them all to Wyoming, teacher. Come on.
I don't think that property crimes should be treated the same way as like on the same level of violence as someone who's advocating for like a genocide or something. But there needs to be repercussions, obviously.
Interesting. So Scotty, on the same questions or the same topic at least, advocated kind of similarly for a secular humanist moral system. He said that current society is too focused on trying to find easy answers to complex questions. He advocates for counseling for criminals and dissidents, severe cases, obviously sent to mental health facilities, but strong controls on those facilities to make sure that they're treated humanely. Yes. I kind of pressed him on re-education centers. Scotty says no re-education centers, but he does go on to say that there should be kind of mandatory outpatient treatment for obese people and smokers.
Any sort of anything that can have a tangible negative impact on your health should be screened. Yes, it should be brought to that person's attention.
Sure.
Okay, TJ.
But Scotty,
because you'd be getting screened.
Scotty, when pressed by TJ on whether or not he would just outright outlaw, triglyceride heavy foods and smoking, Scotty said no, he would allow those vices, of course, with the idea of a society that had informed consent. When we talked about cooperation, TJ, you said you guaranteed you would have a guaranteed standard of living, and it wouldn't really require somebody, quote unquote, making a living. But you're against a planned economy and for laws and regulations that would restrain the forces of capitalism. But still, when you were talking about this, you were talking about still using that basic capitalistic drive and imperative to drive the economy.
Yeah, I think you still use the markets. Right?
Heavily, enforcing the laws and restricting it.
Yeah.
You also said that there is a value to hard work, and the fruits of one's own labor are enriching to people, and that you think that should be woven into your society.
I think it should be preserved for those who want it.
Sure.
I think that if someone disagrees, then I think they should be able to, still have a comfortable existence. I don't think they should have to agree with the notion of hard work, but I mean, they should be willing to accept a lower standard if they're not contributing to society in a meaningful way.
Okay. And on cooperation, Scotty said investment, major investment in the public square and common public areas. He advocates big goals for humanity, such as space exploration and giant leaps in technology and science, giving people a voice in their own future through their work. So allowing people to work in, the areas that most affect them. He would never force, only encourage cooperation. And he would advocate a change in culture to value cooperation and the common good over selfish interest. And he thinks that could be, put into place by slow generational solving of conflict through understanding the underpinnings of people's actions and automation. So kind of studying why people are tied to this part of the land, and over the course of generations, convincing them to leave it, rather than, forcing them off the hurricane-prone land.
Sure. Yeah.
When it comes to conflict, TJ, assholes and those that challenge the status quo are important to society, so says TJ. He would facilitate the alarmists and naysayers to the best of his ability. Everyone who wants a megaphone should be able to get one. Discussion is the primary way of solving personal conflicts. Mediation should happen before judicial proceedings. And the possibility of community tribunals was brought up, which I think is an interesting idea, especially when it comes to property crime that was done within a smaller community.
Sure.
He also advocates working towards a global society. He thinks it's a good idea, but he would not force any other country to join. Diplomacy, military force, second. So that's the, the order. So you would try diplomacy with the other countries first, military force as a deterrent. You would not engage in regime change wars. You would have rigid criteria for preemptive strikes, which to me, your use of that language just leaves a huge amount of,
Well, you brought up the example of the Nazis, which I think,
sure.
So, I mean, I think that in a case that's that extreme, maybe there's some warranting there.
Sure. You went on to say that your society would pursue a 90% pacifist approach.
Yes.
And you talked about also having police effectively disarmed.
Yeah. The majority of them, yeah.
Scotty, on the other hand, diverges from you and says a global society is a must, that any division is asking for conflict. Humanity must start to see itself as a whole species. Avoidance of regional conflict is paramount. In unavoidable conflict, diplomacy first, violence absolutely last.
Yes.
Policemen should be a very difficult position to attain. Law enforcement officers should be tracked while on duty, 100%. And police should also be unarmed.
Yes.
But let's get to the part that really matters, the entertainment section. And boy, is there a discrepancy here.
Yeah.
TJ, and I just took notes. I didn't try and summarize. I just took notes as you were speaking. So this is me talking now.
Right, gotcha.
this society sounds kind of boring.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think from an entertainment perspective, it probably would be. So
tits and ass are nice, but no specific cool shit was mentioned.
Yeah.
TJ sees his society being dull. He even admitted it, based on debates and discussions. So basically The View 24/7.
No, I think it'd be more interesting than that, but not much.
I'm just reading what I wrote here. Okay. You argue with 20 minutes ago, Paul. All right.
Gotcha.
I'm the new Paul now.
Go ahead.
Fair enough.
Of course, high budget porn is a part of TJ's pitch, but
Which I give a thumbs up to on that one too.
And I mean, I'm fine, but you know,
I mean, it is what it is.
Then I took notes during Scotty's presentation on entertainment. Heavy investment in the arts by the public sphere, focus on diversity, empowering creative people to make crazy films, music, literature, and art. Heavy investment in immersive VR. And then I wrote Scotty's pitch gave me a huge boner. So you take that, take that for what it is. And then of course we reached the finals, where you were asked not to talk about yourselves, but to talk about one another. So TJ on Scotty. Scotty feels like he's in a position to say what's best for humanity, but TJ believes that people deserve to make that determination on their own. TJ will deal with dissidents in a harsh and unforgiving manner. Scotty would just study the problem. TJ would solve it. TJ is a bold leader with a bold vision. Scotty is a soft dictator. And then TJ said, if people lose faith in TJ, then he will stand for impeachment. But should the people rise up against him violently, he will fucking destroy them.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Scotty, on the other hand, Scotty says about TJ is prone to ego and vanity. Scotty could set those vices aside. TJ's vision is selfish, built for himself, while Scotty would be the caretaker of humanity. Some of TJ's ideas are good if you want to live like TJ. Scotty's system equals infinite possibilities. And then Scotty went on to say, honey attracts more flies than vinegar. People should really deal with one another and come to an understanding. Force and violence should be a last result. TJ says that's a weakness, but restraint is actually strength. So we come down to the final chapter, gentlemen. Who won tonight? Whose society am I moving to? Am I going to Tijonia, where
come to Tijonia?
Everywhere I go, Sargon of Akkad will be debating some shrill liberal chick, and you know,
hey, maybe
if I step out of line, I'll be squashed like a fucking cockroach.
That's such an unfair categorization, but okay.
Totally unfair. Totally. Or do I want to live in Scotty's techno utopia where everybody understands me and you know, everything is studied. I love things that are studied because it just means, like, for me, it means you can kick it down the line a little bit. And I like that. Mm-hmm. You learn a little bit about it, but you don't got to solve it right now. You got to study that shit first. I like that, Scotty. I think you know which way the wind is blowing, ladies and gentlemen. I am laying my head down.
I think we knew at the fucking
tonight.
beginning what was going to happen here.
Scottonia, I'm sorry. I've got to choose Scottonia. Now, maybe the people disagree with me. Once again, TJ, your redemption lies just below this
video. You know what?
Comments.
I know that you people would rather live in beautiful, free Tijonia than horrible, dystopian Scotopia. So
they might think mine's a dystopia, but with the VR reality and AI realities of them living and creating their own world.
I mean, that probably happened in mine too. I wouldn't be facilitating it. It'd be of the will of the people.
Nah, TJ. So you gotta fund that shit, man.
Don't worry, y'all.
So make your opinions known down in the comments. This is a super important one for you guys to chime in on. Whether this is a patron only episode or a pleb episode, I'm not sure. But whichever. If you're one of those people and you're watching this, chime in below. Who won? Who had a better vision for society and leading that society? Cast your vote. Argue down in the comments. I hope there's at least 2 or 3 arguments in the comments where, like, you look at it and it goes like, see more comments 9, and you go and it's just evolved into these 2 people ripping on each other like, you're a fucking idiot moron. Of course Scotty's got the better vision. You're a stupid fucking retard. TJ's clearly the fucking best. I want that so bad.
Well, we'll see.
We never know. People they might all just embrace me. They might fucking say, or they might all say I'm an idiot and TJ's a genius. We don't fucking know. We have no idea.
But the people have a chance.
I welcome either way.
The people have a chance to redeem you, TJ, or at least even the score, so you didn't take a loss today.
Let's be real. My society is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and so the people will decide. If they'd rather live in
that
Scotty's...
was pretty lame. That was like an 8th grade, running for class president or something.
Let the people decide. I mean, you're but one man.
Look, I want to... Just like my utopian society, TJ, I just want to take this time to say that I accept whatever the people will say, and I want to hear what the people have to say, and I want to study what they have to say.
Yeah, right. You want to dictate to the people what you know is best. Fuck that.
That's not it at all, TJ.
Let the people be free. Let them live in Tijonia!
I love it.
Let them free to be a fucking TJ's fucking boot heel.
All right, well, that's it.
Fucking Wyoming. Have fun in Wyoming, guys.
Yeah, have fun trying to escape from Wyoming.
Don't be violent. You'll be fine. All right. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Deep fat fried. Deep fat